You have just woken up as a crow in a deep, quiet forest. For the next 3 hours, you are going to experience stealing beetles with a twig tool, outsmarting a hunting hawk between the pines, and even gathering in silence around a dead crow. And this won't be easy, so good luck. But before we get into this journey of being a crow, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and why not leave a comment on where you are tuning in from and what animal you want me to cover next. Now, let's begin this epic adventure together. The world enters your consciousness not gently, but with the sharp clarity that comes from 10,000 generations of surviving another night. Your talons grip the oak branch that has been your bed, and your body rocks with the morning's first gusts. The branch sways beneath your weight of perhaps 1.5 pounds, but you know this tree like a lover knows their partner's heartbeat. Every flex of wood, every give and take with the wind, these are the calculations your mind performs before your eyes even fully open. Cold air cuts through the gaps between your feathers, finding the warm downy layer beneath. The sensation triggers an immediate response. Fluff and settle. Trap the heat. Prepare for action. Your internal temperature runs hot, over 100 degrees, and maintaining that heat is the first priority of every waking moment. The wind carries information. Moisture content tells you about incoming weather. Scent traces reveal what died in the night. Air pressure changes whisper about the day's thermal patterns that will either lift you effortlessly or force you to work hard for every wing beat. Your eyes open fully now, and the world explodes into detail that would overwhelm a human mind. Each eye processes information independently, giving you nearly 360 degrees of awareness. The left eye scans for movement in the shadows below. Could be a cat slinking between garbage cans, could be a rat boldly venturing too far from cover. The right eye tracks the sky, reading the silence between the stars that still pierce the dawn light. Hawks hunt at first light. Always check for hawks. Your neck rotates with mechanical precision, head cocking to angles impossible for mammals. This isn't show-off behavior. This is survival architecture. Your ears, hidden beneath sleek feathers, pick up frequency ranges that paint an acoustic map of your territory. The distant hum of traffic tells you humans are beginning their predictable morning routines. Car doors slamming mean dog walkers will soon emerge. The soft scratch of small claws on bark suggests squirrels are already about their business, creating opportunities and competition in equal measure. Memory floods in with consciousness. Yesterday's cache locations flicker through your mind like a mental slideshow. The half-eaten sandwich behind the blue house, the shiny button tucked into the gutter crack, the cluster of acorns buried beneath the fallen leaves near the playground. Each memory is tagged with precise coordinates, threat assessments, and retrieval difficulty ratings. Your brain, proportionally larger than most birds, serves as a biological GPS crossed with a criminal planning database. The internal debate begins. It always begins with hunger. Your metabolism burns fast and hot, demanding fuel within hours of waking. But hunger must be weighed against safety, opportunity costs, and energy expenditure. Flying burns calories. Landing in the wrong place burns your life. Every decision branches into consequences that echo through the day, the season, the winter that's always coming, whether it's months away or moments. A flash of movement triggers your launch response. Your body uncoils from the branch like a spring under tension, wings spreading wide to catch the morning air. The motion is pure instinct refined by practice, no conscious thought required. Your primaries spread and adjust automatically, reading the air pressure and wind direction. Your tail fans for stability and steering. Within milliseconds, you've gone from sleeping bird to aerial predator, 48 inches of wingspan cutting through the morning with mechanical efficiency. The ground drops away, and your perspective shifts to the aerial view that is your true home. From up here, the world becomes a map of opportunities and threats. The geometric patterns of human habitation spread below you, but you read them in terms of food sources, nesting sites, and danger zones. That roof with the solar panels means technology-conscious humans who might leave out bird-friendly food scraps. The yard with the perfect lawn means pesticides and probable hostility to corvids. The house with overgrown gardens and multiple bird feeders signals allies in the endless war for survival. Your flight settles into an efficient rhythm, wings beating just fast enough to maintain altitude, while conserving energy for the day ahead. This is not the frantic escape flight or the playful acrobatics that will come later. This is commuter flight, purposeful, economical, alert. Your route follows the invisible highways you've memorized through seasons of trial and error, avoiding the territories of hostile neighbors, steering clear of areas where hawks like to hunt, angling toward the most promising foraging grounds. As you fly, your mind processes the night's changes to your territory. New cars parked in unusual spots might indicate human behavior changes. A missing trash can suggest schedule alterations that could affect food availability. Fresh construction sounds mean both opportunity, scattered food from worker lunches, and danger from noise, machinery, and disrupted traffic patterns. The morning air begins to warm, and your body responds to the subtle thermal shifts that will define the day's flying conditions. Soon the earth will heat and create the rising columns of warm air that you can ride like invisible elevators, gaining height with minimal effort, but that's still hours away. For now, you fly with purpose toward whatever opportunity calls loudest. The gnawing in your stomach, the memory of yesterday's interrupted meal, or perhaps just the irresistible urge to see what new possibilities this day has brought to your domain. Behind you, the branch where you slept continues to sway in the morning wind, already forgotten until tonight makes it home again. Breakfast raid on the bin line. The alley behind Maple Street runs like a canyon between rows of suburban houses, and you know it as intimately as a surgeon knows anatomy. Every garbage bin has its own personality. The blue one with the loose lid that rattles in wind, the black container that's always overstuffed by Thursday morning, the green bin where the woman with the small dog deposits the good scraps wrapped in paper towels rather than plastic bags. This is your grocery store, your hunting ground, your morning office where serious business gets conducted before the humans wake fully and complicate everything. You perch on the telephone wire 40 feet above the alley, scanning with methodical precision. Tuesday is garbage day on this side of the street, which means Monday night was preparation night for the humans. They performed their weekly ritual of consolidating waste, dragging containers to curbside positions, creating the temporary buffet that feeds your kind throughout the suburban landscape. But raiding garbage bins isn't simple opportunism. It's tactical warfare that requires intelligence, timing, and backup. Your sibling drops onto the wire beside you, landing with the barely perceptible bounce that travels through the cable. No greeting calls. Sound discipline is essential during reconnaissance. You've worked together for 3 seasons now, developing the wordless coordination that makes complex operations possible. Your sibling's role is clear. Watch for threats, provide distraction when needed, and share the rewards of successful raids. Trust in partnership multiplies survival odds exponentially. The scan reveals this morning's tactical situation. The yellow house's bin lid sits slightly askew, either wind displacement or inadequate closure by distracted humans. High-value target. The corner house shows signs of party aftermath. Multiple bags stacked beside the main container, likely containing food waste mixed with the detritus of human celebration. Medium-value target, requiring extended exposure time. The house with the constantly barking dog presents the classic risk-reward scenario. Great food scraps protected by an alarm system with teeth. Movement catches your peripheral vision. A neighbor's cat stalking something in the gap between bins. Cats complicate garbage operations in multiple ways. They're predators capable of inflicting serious damage. They're territorial about food sources, and their presence indicates humans might be awake and watching through windows. The cat's body language suggests hunting focus rather than scavenging competition. But cats are chaos agents that can destroy carefully planned operations through sheer unpredictability. You launch from the wire in a controlled descent, your sibling following 3 seconds behind, according to established protocol. The approach angle matters. Too steep, and you can't scan for threats during descent. Too shallow, and you spend too much time visible against the sky. You aim for the shadow beside the yellow house's bin, wings adjusting for the perfect silent landing that won't trigger motion sensors or alert sleeping dogs. Your talons grip the bin's plastic rim, and immediately you assess the treasure within. Bread crusts, fruit peels, something that might be leftover pizza wrapped in greasy paper. The pizza smell hits your nostrils with the force of caloric promise. Fats and proteins and carbohydrates, all wrapped together in the perfect fuel for high-energy corvid metabolism. But first, the safety protocols that keep you alive in human territory. Your sibling lands on the adjacent fence post, head swiveling in the mechanical scan pattern that monitors all threat vectors. One eye watches the houses for signs of human activity. The other tracks the sky for hawks who might capitalize on your ground-focused vulnerability. The cat has disappeared, which is either good news or very bad news, depending on where it went. Cats are ambush predators, and garbage bins create perfect hunting blinds. You begin the careful process of bin archaeology. Garbage contains layers of information about human behavior, dietary preferences, schedule changes, and household composition. The top layer holds Monday night's dinner cleanup, paper towels stained with something red, possibly tomato sauce, and the blessed discovery of chicken bones wrapped in aluminum foil. Chicken bones require careful evaluation. Cooked bones can splinter and kill, but the meat scraps clinging to safe sections provide high-quality protein. Your beak works with precision, selecting and rejecting potential food items according to criteria learned through experience and inherited wisdom. The bright green substance on one scrap triggers ancient warning systems. Plants produce toxins in brilliant colors, and even processed human food can carry dangerous chemistry. The brown apple core passes the safety test and goes into your expandable crop for later processing. Half a hamburger bun gets the same treatment. A car door slams somewhere in the distance, triggering heightened alert status. Humans are mobile and unpredictable early in the morning, and garbage day brings additional truck traffic that can materialize without warning. Your sibling's posture changes slightly, still watchful, but with the subtle shift that indicates elevated threat awareness. The window for safe scavenging is narrowing as the human world awakens. You discover treasure wrapped in a napkin, French fries still glistening with salt and fat. Salt is essential for avian metabolism, and fat provides concentrated energy that can mean the difference between surviving a harsh day and weakening toward vulnerability. The fries go immediately into your crop, followed by several more choice selections that represent the morning's caloric success. The sound of a screen door opening freezes you mid-selection. Through the gap between houses, you can see a human figure emerging onto a back porch, likely the owner of the treasure you're currently redistributing. The human appears to be in the ritual of morning beverage consumption, attention focused on a steaming cup rather than the alley behind their property. Still, exposed position plus alert human equals tactical withdrawal time. Your sibling launches first, providing aerial cover as you extract from the bin with controlled urgency. No panic. Panic leads to mistakes, and mistakes lead to collision, injury, or capture. Your wing beats are calculated for maximum lift with minimum noise, angling toward the maple tree that provides both cover and elevation for threat assessment. From the safety of the maple's crown, you cache one precious French fry in the crotch, where 3 branches meet. Insurance against future hunger, stored according to the ancient corvid wisdom of never putting all resources in one location. The remainder of your morning success settles comfortably in your crop, already beginning the digestive process that will fuel the day's activities. The raid is complete, successful, and executed without casualties or detection. Your sibling rejoins you in the maple canopy, and for a moment you engage in the quiet preening that serves as both grooming and celebration. Another morning, another successful navigation of the delicate balance between hunger and safety that defines existence in the spaces between human and wild. Below you, the garbage bins wait in their neat rows, tomorrow's possibilities already accumulating in their plastic depths. Tool time. At the fence post. The weathered fence post stands like a monument to possibility, its grey wood scarred by seasons and insects, honeycombed with the galleries where beetles and larvae have excavated their intricate cities. You've visited this post perhaps 100 times, and it never disappoints. The wood is soft enough to work but firm enough to hold tunnels, and the southern exposure means sun-warmed insects emerge predictably when morning light hits the surface just right. Today, like many days before, this post will become your workshop, your laboratory, your demonstration of the cognitive abilities that separate corvids from the merely clever. You land with deliberate precision on the post's flat top, talons gripping the worn surface where other crows have stood before you. The wood bears the scratches and gouges of previous excavations, a palimpsest of tool use written in tiny scars. Your immediate task is tool selection, and you approach it with the methodical consideration of a craftsman choosing instruments. 3 feet below your perch, a cluster of dropped twigs offers raw materials, straight sections broken from oak and maple, curved fragments from the flexible birch, and the prize, a piece of wire dropped by careless humans during some long-forgotten repair project. The art of tool construction begins with understanding your target. The beetle larvae hiding in the post's tunnels are soft-bodied, rich in fat and protein, and positioned just beyond the reach of your beak. They retreat deeper when threatened, using the wood structure as armor against predators. But they cannot retreat infinitely, and they cannot resist the properly presented stimulus that triggers their feeding response. Your tool must be long enough to reach them, flexible enough to navigate the curved tunnels, and shaped to either hook the larvae directly or provoke them into grabbing range. You select a straight twig, roughly the length of your primary flight feather, examining it with the focused attention of a surgeon choosing a scalpel. The bark is smooth enough to slide through narrow spaces, but textured enough to provide grip when you need to apply torque. One end tapers naturally to a point suitable for probing. The other end fits comfortably in your beak, with enough material to provide leverage for the delicate manipulations ahead. But this tool needs modification to reach its full potential. You grasp the twig crosswise in your beak and apply careful pressure, bending the tip into a subtle hook. Too much pressure, and the wood snaps. Too little, and the hook won't hold when you encounter resistance. The bending requires precise force application, using your tongue and beak interior to control the angle while your jaw muscles provide the power. The resulting hook curves perhaps 15 degrees from straight, enough to catch and drag, not enough to jam in the tunnel walls. Your first probe into the post reveals the tunnel structure through tactile feedback transmitted up the tool shaft. The opening descends straight for perhaps an inch, then curves right following the wood grain. Your hooked tool slides easily through the initial section, then encounters the resistance that indicates either a bend in the tunnel or the presence of your target. Gentle pressure and a slight twisting motion help the tool navigate the curve, and suddenly you feel the distinctive give that means contact with soft tissue. The larva's response is immediate. It grabs the tool tip with mandibles designed for chewing wood fibers. This is the critical moment where tool becomes trap. You maintain steady pressure, neither pulling so hard that the larva releases its grip, nor allowing so much slack that it can retreat deeper into its tunnel. The balance requires constant adjustment based on the resistance feedback traveling up your improvised fishing line. Slowly, steadily, you draw the tool back toward the tunnel entrance. The larva emerges reluctantly, its pale, segmented body contrasting against the dark wood. It's perhaps an inch long, fat, with stored nutrients, and completely helpless outside its protective gallery. Your beak snaps forward with predator precision, and the morning's first protein source slides down your throat with satisfying efficiency. But you're not alone at the fence post today. A juvenile crow, perhaps from last season's nesting, not quite adult but beyond the helpless fledgling stage, has been watching your technique from a nearby branch. Its attention is focused and intent, the posture of learning rather than idle curiosity. Teaching moments like this don't happen by accident. They emerge from the intersection of individual skill, social opportunity, and the deep evolutionary pressure to pass knowledge between generations. You repeat the process with exaggerated deliberateness, each movement slightly slower and more pronounced than necessary for simple efficiency. Tool selection becomes a demonstration. You examine several twigs before choosing, rejecting some for obvious flaws that the juvenile can observe and remember. The bending process unfolds like a slow-motion tutorial, allowing the young crow to see the precise pressure application and the resulting curve. The probing technique emphasizes the gentle touch required to navigate tunnel complexities without jamming the tool or frightening the prey. The juvenile attempts to mirror your actions, selecting a twig from the ground debris and examining it with the same head-tilting scrutiny you demonstrated. Its first choice is too thick for the narrow tunnels, a mistake you allow it to discover through direct experience rather than intervention. Learning requires trial and error, and premature correction can interfere with the deep understanding that comes from personal discovery. On its second attempt, the juvenile chooses a more appropriate tool and begins the bending process. Its technique is clumsy, applying too much force too quickly, and the twig snaps. Frustration flickers across its posture. Ruffled feathers, agitated head movements, the avian equivalent of muttered cursing. But frustration is part of learning, and you continue your own excavations while the juvenile selects another candidate. Success, when it comes, is worth celebrating. The juvenile's third tool attempt produces a workable hook, and its careful probing of a tunnel yields a small larva after several minutes of patient manipulation. The young crow's satisfaction is visible in its posture as it consumes its hard-won prize. Knowledge has been transferred, skill has been developed, and the cultural tradition of tool use continues its passage between generations. You cache your best tool in a crack where the fence post meets its supporting crossbeam. Tomorrow or next week, you'll return to this productive site, and having a pre-made implement ready will save time and energy. The cache location is marked in your spatial memory with the precision of GPS coordinates, 3 inches below the post top, facing south, wedged behind the loose bark flap that provides protection from weather and theft. As you prepare to leave the fence post workshop, you take a final survey of your domain. The juvenile continues its practice excavations, building the muscle memory and tactile sensitivity that will serve it throughout its life. The post itself remains a renewable resource, its beetle populations self-sustaining as long as the wood structure provides habitat. And your own skills have been sharpened through teaching, the way explaining complex concepts to others deepens understanding in the teacher. The fence post stands ready for tomorrow's challenges, scarred by today's activities but essentially unchanged. In this intersection of natural resource and learned behavior, the ancient dance between intelligence and environment continues its endless improvisation. The rooftop water bar, social gossip, the flat-topped roof of the old brick warehouse catches rainwater in shallow depressions where the tar surface has settled over decades of thermal expansion and contraction. What began as simple architectural aging has evolved into the neighborhood's most important social hub, a gathering place where information flows as freely as the precious water that pools in these urban oasis spots. You arrive to find the morning assembly already in progress. 8 crows scattered across the rooftop's 100-foot expanse, each maintaining the precise social distance that balances community benefits with individual safety. Water means everything to a crow. Your metabolism runs hot and fast, and dehydration can kill faster than starvation. But water sources in urban environments are often contaminated, temporary, or controlled by humans who may or may not tolerate corvid visitors. This rooftop pool represents the ideal. Clean rainwater collected on a surface high enough to provide escape routes in all directions, removed from ground predators, and positioned where approaching threats can be spotted from significant distance. The water tastes of nothing but sky and cloud, free from the chemical tang of treated municipal supplies or the organic complexity of pond water shared with other species. You approach the nearest pool with the ritualized caution that keeps social gatherings from descending into chaos. Direct approach signals aggression. Too much circling suggests weakness. The optimal path angles toward the water source while acknowledging the presence of others through subtle body language, wings held close but not tight, head position alert but not challenging. The overall posture of a neighbor arriving at a community meeting. The first sip sends cool relief spreading through your body, but drinking requires vulnerability. Your head must tilt back to swallow, temporarily reducing your visual field and reaction time. This is why rooftop water sources work. Multiple pairs of eyes provide collective security, while each individual drinks. The crow nearest to your position serves as inadvertent lookout while you satisfy your thirst, and you'll return the favor when she needs to drink. Reciprocity operates at levels both conscious and automatic. Between drinks, the social dynamics unfold through the complex language of posture, movement, and sound. The large male perched on the roof's eastern edge holds the highest position, literally and figuratively. His size and confident bearing mark him as a successful territory holder, someone whose opinions carry weight in neighborhood affairs. When he shifts position, others adjust accordingly, maintaining the invisible web of social distances that keeps interactions peaceful. The information exchange begins with subtle vocalizations, soft clicks, and brief core notes that carry data about food sources, threats, and opportunities. The female near the roof center produces a sound sequence that translates roughly to abundant food source, minimal danger. Location follows. The response from other crows indicates recognition and interest. Food information is valuable currency in corvid society, and sharing it builds social capital that can be crucial during harsh weather or territorial disputes. Your contribution to the conversation involves yesterday's discovery of the construction site where human workers regularly discard lunch scraps. The location data is precise. 17 blocks north, behind the building with the blue awning, timing optimal between noon and 1 o'clock when workers take their meal break. This information has value because it's current, specific, and actionable. In return, you learn about a new dog in the territory. Aggressive breed, unpredictable behavior. Avoid the yard with the red mailbox. The gossip network extends beyond immediate food and safety concerns into the intricate social mapping that governs corvid neighborhood politics. The pair that attempted to nest in the oak tree last month suffered nest failure due to jay harassment. Their current status shows signs of stress and reduced confidence. Information that affects everything from territorial negotiations to mate selection. The juvenile who's been practicing tool use at the fence post shows promising development and might become a valuable ally or dangerous competitor, depending on how territorial boundaries shift over time. A subtle shift in the social dynamic occurs when an unfamiliar crow lands on the roof's western edge. Stranger assessment happens instantly and collectively. Size suggests adult male. Feather condition indicates good health and adequate nutrition. Flight approach showed confidence, but not aggression. The newcomer maintains proper distance from established positions, and waits for acknowledgement before approaching water sources. Good social protocols, but strangers always introduce uncertainty into established group dynamics. The established members engage in the careful process of stranger evaluation. This involves graduated testing, allowing approach to peripheral water sources while monitoring behavior, observing feeding techniques and tool use for signs of competence or unusual methods, and listening to vocalizations for dialect markers that might indicate geographic origin. Crows from different regions sometimes carry different techniques, knowledge, or even parasites that could affect local population health. Integration proceeds slowly and conditionally. The stranger demonstrates appropriate water-sharing etiquette, maintains respectful distances, and contributes useful information about hawk behavior observed during morning flight. These positive indicators earn grudging acceptance, but full social membership requires weeks or months of consistent positive interactions. Trust builds slowly in corvid society, and for good reason. The wrong ally can mean territorial losses, resource competition, or exposure to new threats. The social hierarchy becomes visible through feeding order and position preferences. The dominant male drinks first from the choicest pools, followed by his presumed mate, then other adults in descending order of social status. Younger crows wait for permission signals before approaching prime water sources, and they're quick to yield space if higher-ranking individuals show interest in their locations. This system minimizes conflict and ensures that the most successful individuals, those whose genes and knowledge are most valuable to future generations, receive priority access to essential resources. Competition emerges subtly through displays of competence and knowledge. One crow demonstrates an unusual technique for extracting insects from roof debris, using the tip of her wing to flip over small stones and reveal hidden prey. Another produces information about a new route that avoids a recently established hawk territory. These displays serve multiple functions. They establish individual worth within the group. They contribute to collective knowledge, and they advertise capabilities that might be valuable in future partnerships or alliances. As the morning advances and individual thirst is satisfied, the gathering begins its natural dissolution. Crows launch in different directions toward personal territories and individual agendas, but the information exchanged here will ripple through their activities for days to come. Food sources will be investigated, threats will be avoided or confronted, and social bonds will be strengthened or weakened based on the reliability of information shared. You take a final drink from the cleanest pool and launch toward your territory, carrying with you not just physical hydration, but the social hydration that comes from community connection. The rooftop will remain a neutral meeting ground, its water sources renewed by each rainfall, its role as information exchange facilitated by the simple fact that all living things need water, and that safety in numbers applies as much to drinking as to any other vulnerable activity in the ongoing dance of survival. Funeral for a fallen feather. The dark form beside the road doesn't register immediately as one of your own. At first glance, it might be debris, a discarded plastic bag perhaps, or scattered trash blown against the curb by passing traffic. But something in the shape triggers deeper recognition systems, and you alter course for a closer investigation. The morning light reveals what your instincts already suspected. Black feathers, the distinctive corvid silhouette, the utter stillness that means death has claimed another member of your kind. You land 15 feet away, maintaining safe distance while your senses process the scene. The position suggests vehicle strike, the most common cause of corvid mortality in urban environments. The body lies parallel to the road's edge, likely thrown there by impact physics, and shows no signs of predation or disease. Simply a miscalculation in the endless risk-benefit calculations that define survival. Perhaps distracted by food in the roadway, perhaps caught by unexpected vehicle speed. perhaps just unlucky in the timing that separates successful scavenging from fatal error. Your first alarm call cuts through the morning air, a harsh sound that serves multiple purposes. It announces the presence of danger, roads kill, and this death scene proves it. It summons other crows who need to witness and learn from this tragedy, and it honors the fallen with the corvid equivalent of a funeral bell, acknowledging that something valuable has been lost to the community. Response comes quickly. 2 crows arrive from the east, landing in the oak tree that overlooks the death scene. A third appears from the residential district, alighting on a fence post with clear sightlines to the road. Within minutes, a loose circle of observers has formed around the fallen crow, each individual maintaining the distance necessary for quick escape while positioning for maximum information gathering. The gathering grows as more crows respond to the alarm calls that echo between participants. This is not random assembly. It's organized reconnaissance with life or death implications. Every crow in the area needs to understand what happened here, when it happened, and what environmental factors contributed to this mortality event. The knowledge gained from examining death scenes can prevent future casualties among family, flock mates, and neighbors. Your role shifts from discoverer to investigator as you approach the body with careful precision. Every detail matters. The condition of the feathers indicates this death was recent, probably within the last few hours. The position of the wings suggests the crow was in landing configuration when struck, likely focusing on food or water near the roadway. The undamaged condition of most body parts indicates high-speed impact rather than prolonged struggle with predators. The assembled crows maintain vigilant silence as you conduct the examination. This scene is exposed and dangerous. Roads that kill crows can kill investigating crows just as easily. But the learning opportunity is too valuable to ignore. Road mortality patterns provide crucial data about traffic timing, driver behavior, and the specific environmental conditions that create fatal miscalculations. This knowledge gets incorporated into the collective wisdom that governs foraging decisions near human transportation corridors. A human vehicle approaches, and the assembly scatters with practiced efficiency. Death scenes draw attention, and attention from humans can mean additional threats. Curious children, aggressive adults, or official responses that might include habitat modification. You retreat to the oak tree, joining the other observers in temporary safety while the vehicle passes. The driver shows no awareness of the corvid drama unfolding beside their morning commute. When the road clears, the investigation resumes with increased urgency. Prolonged exposure at this location increases risk for all participants, but the data collection isn't complete. You note the specific position relative to road markers, the wind direction that might have affected flight approach, the presence of food debris that might have motivated the fatal landing attempt. These details will be encoded in spatial memory and shared through the complex communication networks that keep corvid communities informed about environmental hazards. The emotional dimensions of this gathering run deeper than simple information exchange. Crows possess cognitive abilities that support something analogous to grief, the recognition that a complex, intelligent individual has been permanently removed from the social network. The deceased crow represented years of accumulated knowledge, established territory rights, potential reproductive contribution, and social relationships that now require adjustment and replacement. This loss diminishes the entire community's collective intelligence and survival resources. Memorial behavior emerges through subtle actions. One crow approaches close enough to touch the body briefly with her beak. Not feeding behavior, but contact that seems to serve acknowledgement purposes. Others produce soft vocalizations that lack the harsh urgency of alarm calls. The sounds are lower, more complex, carrying emotional content that resists simple translation but clearly communicates something beyond mere threat assessment. The presence of juveniles in the assembly adds educational dimensions to the gathering. Young crows need direct exposure to mortality consequences to develop appropriate risk assessment capabilities. Overprotection from death scenes can leave them vulnerable to the same mistakes that claimed this victim. The adult crow's behavior provides modeling for appropriate responses, investigative courage, balanced with safety consciousness, collective information gathering, and respectful acknowledgement of loss. As the morning advances, the assembly begins natural dissolution. The investigative phase is complete, the relevant data has been gathered and shared, and continued exposure at this dangerous location serves no productive purpose. But the death scene will be remembered and referenced in future decision-making. This stretch of road becomes flagged in collective memory as high-risk habitat requiring extra caution. Your departure carries the weight of new knowledge about environmental hazards and the sobering reminder that intelligence provides no immunity from the physical laws that govern urban environments. The fallen crow's death contributes to community survival by teaching lessons that could prevent future casualties. In Corvid society, even death serves the living through the transfer of crucial information about the dangers that lurk within familiar territories. The road returns to its normal traffic patterns, oblivious to the drama that unfolded beside its margins. But the Corvid community carries forward enhanced understanding of the calculated risks that define existence in human-modified landscapes. Death teaches the living, and the living honor the dead by surviving more skillfully in the dangerous world they all share. Tomorrow, this road will be approached with greater caution, crossed with enhanced awareness, and remembered as the place where community knowledge was purchased with individual life. The price of survival education is always paid in mortality, but the education itself becomes a legacy that can protect future generations from similar fates. Sky maps, memory palaces. Your mind contains a three-dimensional atlas that would make human cartographers weep with envy. Every cache location, every food source, every safe roosting spot, every territorial boundary exists in your memory as precise coordinates, cross-referenced with seasonal changes, threat assessments, and recovery difficulty ratings. This mental database represents years of accumulated survival knowledge, and accessing it requires the same kind of systematic navigation that human scholars use to explore vast libraries. Except your library is built from landmarks that stretch across miles of territory, and the consequences of forgotten information can mean starvation, exposure, or death. The system begins with anchor points, distinctive features that serve as primary reference markers for all other spatial information. The red billboard advertising car insurance sits at the intersection of two major roads, visible from altitude and stable across seasons. Its position anchors a web of secondary landmarks: the crooked chimney 3 blocks south, the lightning, scarred oak that lost its crown last winter, the playground where human children reliably scatter food crumbs, the storm drain where rainwater creates temporary puddles after heavy weather. Each anchor point connects to memory chains that spiral outward in logical patterns. From the red billboard, your mental map traces north to the construction site where workers discard lunch scraps, then east to the cemetery where soft ground makes insect excavation easy, then south to the residential district where garbage day creates weekly foraging opportunities. These routes are not mere straight lines but complex paths that account for wind patterns, predator territories, escape routes, and energy expenditure calculations. The memory palace technique that humans struggle to master comes naturally to Corvid cognition. Your food caches exist within detailed mental environments where every relevant feature is encoded and cross-referenced. The acorns buried beneath the maple root system are remembered not just as acorns under tree, but as 17 acorns buried 4 inches deep beneath the maple root that curves east around the large granite stone, 12 wing beats north of the storm drain, cached during the 3rd week of autumn when the red leaves covered the burial site. Seasonal variations require dynamic updating of this spatial database. The apple tree that provides windfall fruit in autumn becomes a winter shelter site when its bare branches offer wind protection. The creek that runs high during spring snowmelt becomes a chain of disconnected pools during summer drought. Your memory system accounts for these changes through temporal layering. The same geographic coordinates hold different information depending on seasonal context. Cache management operates on multiple timescales simultaneously. Immediate caches, food hidden for retrieval within hours or days, require precise short-term memory with high accuracy demands. Seasonal caches buried for winter survival need long-term storage that remains accessible after months of environmental change. Emergency caches scattered throughout territory. Boundaries serve as insurance against territorial displacement or unexpected food shortages. The art of cache placement involves complex calculations that balance security against accessibility. Buried caches protect food from competitors and weather, but require energy expenditure for excavation. Elevated caches in tree hollows provide easy access but risk discovery by other crows, squirrels, or persistent human observers. Hidden caches wedged into building crevices offer protection and convenience, but depend on stable structures that might undergo human modification. Your mental inventory system tracks not just cache locations but cache contents, burial conditions, and estimated degradation rates. The half sandwich cached behind the blue house needs retrieval within 3 days before mold makes it inedible. The collection of shiny objects hidden in the oak tree hollow serves long-term hoarding instincts and can wait months for attention. The emergency seed cache buried in the park requires periodic checking to ensure that rain hasn't caused germination that would destroy its food value. Navigation between cache sites follows energy-efficient flight paths that account for wind conditions, thermal availability, and threat assessment. Your route from the cemetery acorn cache to the construction site lunch scraps might follow the river corridor during calm weather for easy gliding, or shift to the residential tree line during strong winds that make open-area flight more difficult. Alternative routes remain available for conditions when primary paths become dangerous due to hawk activity or human disturbance. The system includes elaborate backup protocols for catastrophic memory failure or territorial displacement. Key cache locations are cross-referenced with multiple landmark systems, so loss of one anchor point doesn't render associated caches irretrievable. Particularly valuable caches receive redundant encoding through multiple sensory modalities, visual landmarks supplemented by scent markers, tactile reference points, and auditory cues that help pinpoint exact locations. Error correction operates continuously as you revisit cache sites and update spatial information based on environmental changes. The construction project that eliminated your favorite tool caching tree gets replaced in memory with the new fence post that offers similar hiding opportunities. The storm that toppled landmark trees requires extensive mental map revision, with new reference points established and old coordinates transferred to updated locations. Sharing spatial information with family members and trusted flockmates creates redundant knowledge storage that benefits the entire social group. When you discover a particularly rich food source, the location data gets encoded, not just in your personal memory palace, but transmitted through the complex communication systems that allow other crows to find and exploit the same opportunity. This shared spatial knowledge increases survival odds for the entire community while establishing social bonds through information reciprocity. The mental effort required to maintain this elaborate spatial database is substantial but essential. During quiet moments between foraging and social activities, you engage in mental rehearsal that strengthens memory, consolidation, and tests recall accuracy. Flying familiar routes becomes meditation time where cache locations are reviewed, landmark changes are noted, and spatial relationships are reinforced through repetitive mental practice. Your navigation system integrates seamlessly with daily survival activities, operating mostly below conscious awareness until specific information is required. The decision to investigate a distant food source automatically accesses cached knowledge about flight routes, energy costs, territorial boundaries, and backup options. The complexity remains hidden behind smooth functionality, like a sophisticated computer interface that makes complicated operations appear simple and natural. Weather patterns add another layer to spatial memory management. Strong winds shift thermal locations and alter optimal flight paths. Rain changes visibility and ground conditions around cache sites. Snow covers landmark features and makes buried caches temporarily inaccessible. Your memory system accounts for these variables through conditional programming that adjusts navigation and retrieval strategies based on current environmental conditions. The investment in spatial memory pays survival dividends throughout your life, but it also creates vulnerability to catastrophic loss through brain injury, disease, or severe stress. Crows who suffer memory damage from collisions, toxin exposure, or territorial trauma face life-threatening challenges in relocating essential resources. The elaborate mental architecture that supports survival can become a liability when the cognitive systems that maintain it suffer disruption. As seasons cycle and years pass, your memory palace grows ever more elaborate and detailed. New discoveries add rooms and corridors to the mental structure. Repeated experiences strengthen the neural pathways that support recall accuracy. Failed retrievals and changed circumstances require renovation and updating. The result is a personalized geographic encyclopedia that represents one of nature's most sophisticated solutions to the challenge of surviving in a complex, changing environment where spatial knowledge means the difference between feast and famine, safety and exposure, life and death. Midday thermal games, aerial tag. The sun climbs toward its zenith, and the earth begins its daily transformation into a thermal engine that can lift you toward the sky with minimal effort. Concrete parking lots, metal rooftops, and dark asphalt absorb solar radiation and heat the air above them, creating invisible columns of rising warmth that spiral upward like transparent tornadoes. To human senses, these thermals remain completely undetectable, but your body reads them through subtle pressure changes, temperature gradients, and the microscopic turbulence that tickles your flight feathers with promises of effortless altitude. Finding the first thermal of the day requires patience and systematic searching. You circle over the shopping center parking lot, wings extended in soaring configuration, feeling for the telltale lift that indicates a developing column of heated air. Your wingtips spread wide, individual feathers adjusting automatically to sample air currents and pressure variations. The detection comes gradually. First, a subtle reduction in the effort required to maintain altitude, then a gentle lifting sensation as rising air begins to support your weight. When you find the thermal's core, the sensation transforms from work to play. Your wings lock into gliding position, and the heated air carries you upward in a lazy spiral that requires no energy expenditure beyond steering adjustments. The ground drops away below as you rise through successive altitude layers, each offering a different perspective on your territory. From 200 feet, individual houses resolve into neighborhood patterns. From 400 feet, roads become visible as transportation networks connecting human settlements. From 600 feet, the full scope of your territory spreads out like a three-dimensional map. But you're not alone in the thermal. The distinctive whistle of incoming wings announces the arrival of another crow, then another, until a loose flock of 7 birds shares the column of rising air. This is not coincidence. Thermal locations are known and shared resources, and successful exploitation requires social cooperation that prevents dangerous collisions while maximizing lift efficiency for all participants. The aerial dance that follows operates according to unspoken rules, developed through countless generations of corvid social flying. Clockwise spiral direction prevents head-on encounters between ascending birds. Vertical separation maintains safe spacing while allowing multiple crows to exploit the same thermal core. Wing position communication signals intended direction changes before they occur, preventing the mid-air collisions that could prove fatal for all participants. What begins as cooperative thermal exploitation gradually evolves into something that resembles play more than practical transportation. The young adult male who joined the thermal spiral third begins experimenting with aerobatic maneuvers that serve no obvious survival function. He drops one wing suddenly, slipping sideways out of the thermal core, then snaps into a tight barrel roll that carries him back into rising air with precision that suggests extensive practice. The display triggers competitive responses from other crows in the thermal. Soon, the efficient spiral becomes a playground for aerial acrobatics that push the boundaries of corvid flight capability. Inverted flight, rapid altitude changes, coordinated formation flying, and mock combat maneuvers transform the thermal into an arena for skill demonstration and social bonding that transcends simple transportation utility. You join the aerial games with a series of wing-over maneuvers that showcase your ability to maintain control during rapid direction changes. The technique requires precise timing and muscle coordination. Pull up sharply to convert airspeed into altitude. Hold the climb until forward momentum nearly stops. Then drop one wing and slice downward in a controlled fall that builds speed for the next maneuver. Executed properly, the wing-over combines the thrill of controlled falling with the satisfaction of technical mastery. The games escalate when someone initiates a chase sequence that resembles aerial tag played at lethal altitudes. The designated target must evade pursuit through superior maneuvering, while the chaser attempts to achieve symbolic contact, coming close enough to touch without actual collision. The roles reverse when contact occurs or when pursuit exceeds the agreed-upon time limit. What emerges is a complex game that tests flight skills, spatial awareness, and split-second decision-making under pressure. But the aerial games serve purposes beyond simple entertainment. The young crows in the group are building flight skills that could save their lives during actual predator encounters. The acrobatic maneuvers that look like play are training exercises for the escape techniques that might be needed when hawks attack or territorial disputes turn violent. The social bonds formed through shared aerial adventure create alliances that can provide crucial support during resource conflicts or breeding season competitions. The thermal games also establish and reinforce social hierarchies through displays of flying competence. The crow who executes the most complex maneuvers earns respect and status within the group. The individual who shows consistent control and precision in challenging conditions demonstrates qualities that could be valuable in a mate or ally. The aerial arena becomes a testing ground where social relationships are negotiated through demonstrated skill rather than aggressive confrontation. Risk management operates at conscious and unconscious levels throughout the aerial games. Individual crows monitor their energy reserves and altitude margins, ensuring they retain sufficient resources for safe return to ground level. Group participants maintain awareness of each other's positions and capabilities, preventing dangerous interactions that could result from mismatched skill levels or miscommunicated intentions. The play remains vigorous, but never reckless, bounded by survival instincts that prevent games from becoming genuine hazards. Environmental awareness continues throughout the aerial activities. Wind changes that could affect thermal stability receive immediate attention and response. Approaching hawks or other potential threats trigger instant cessation of games and implementation of appropriate defensive measures. Human activities that might create hazards, aircraft, firearms, vehicles, are monitored and avoided without interrupting the social aspects of group flying. The thermal games typically end when environmental conditions change rather than through group decision or conflict. Rising winds can destabilize thermal formation, making continued aerial play dangerous or impossible. Decreasing solar heating as afternoon advances can weaken thermal strength below the threshold required for effortless soaring. Alternative activities, foraging opportunities, territorial maintenance, roosting preparation, eventually claim priority over recreational flying. As the group dissolves and individual crows scatter toward personal territories and individual agendas, the social bonds formed through shared aerial adventure remain active. The trust built through successful cooperation in high-risk situations creates relationships that extend beyond recreational contexts. The flight skills practiced during thermal games translate directly into enhanced survival capabilities during actual emergency situations. You glide away from the dissipating thermal with muscles warmed by exercise and social connections strengthened by shared experience. The afternoon stretches ahead with its own challenges and opportunities, but the memory of cooperative flight and successful aerial play provides psychological resources that enhance confidence and social standing within the complex networks that govern Corvid community life. The thermal column continues rising into the afternoon sky, invisible to human perception, but marked in Corvid memory as a reliable source of lift and social interaction. Tomorrow or next week, when conditions are right, the aerial games will resume with the same participants or different ones, continuing the ancient tradition of turning survival skills into social entertainment that strengthens both individual capabilities and community bonds. Raven neighbors, border negotiations. The territorial boundary where your crow domain meets Raven country is marked not by fences or signs, but by an invisible line written in scent markers, territorial calls, and the accumulated weight of countless small conflicts that have established the limits of safe expansion for both species. Today, that boundary is being tested. A pair of ravens has been observed foraging increasingly close to the disputed area around the old water tower, and their presence represents both opportunity and threat in the complex calculus of interspecies corvid politics. Ravens are your cousins in the great family tree of intelligent birds, sharing enough genetic heritage to make communication possible but different enough to create fundamental conflicts over resources, territory, and survival strategies. They're larger than crows, significantly larger, with wingspans that can exceed 4 feet and body weights that dwarf your own 1.5 pound frame. That size advantage translates into physical dominance in direct confrontations, but it also creates vulnerabilities that smaller, more agile crows can exploit through superior numbers and tactical flexibility. You approach the boundary zone with a scouting party of 3 other crows, flying in loose formation that allows for rapid dispersal if the situation turns dangerous. The raven's presence is confirmed by their distinctive calls, deeper, more resonant than crow vocalizations, carrying emotional undertones that speak of confidence bordering on arrogance. These are not desperate birds, driven by starvation into risky territory violations. These are successful predators, exploring the possibility of expanding their domain at your expense. The first visual contact occurs at a distance of perhaps 200 yards. The ravens are ground foraging near a cluster of garbage cans, their massive forms moving with the deliberate efficiency that characterizes apex scavengers. One is clearly larger than the other, likely a mated pair with the male taking point position while his partner feeds. Their body language shows awareness of your approach but no immediate concern, the posture of individuals confident in their ability to handle whatever confrontation might develop. Corvid diplomacy operates through subtle escalation of signals designed to test resolve without triggering unnecessary violence. Your initial approach maintains neutral flight patterns and vocalizations. No aggressive posturing, but clear indication that this territorial incursion has been noticed and is being evaluated. The ravens respond with their own neutral signals, continued foraging activity but increased alertness, heads rising more frequently to track your movement, wings held in positions that allow for quick combat deployment if needed. The negotiation begins with positional chess. Your scouting party lands on elevated perches that provide tactical advantage while maintaining escape routes. The ravens shift to positions that offer better defensive options while keeping access to their food source. Both sides engage in the corvid equivalent of showing force without using it. Wing displays that demonstrate size and fitness, call sequences that advertise social support, movement patterns that suggest confidence, and territorial commitment. The standoff reveals the fundamental differences between raven and crow survival strategies. Ravens rely on individual prowess, pair bonding, and territorial domination of large areas that can support their substantial caloric needs. Crows survive through social cooperation, information sharing, and intensive exploitation of smaller territories through superior numbers and collective intelligence. Neither strategy is inherently superior, but they create conflicts when territories overlap and resources become contested. The male raven initiates the first direct challenge by approaching closer to your territory's core area while maintaining eye contact with your scouting party. This is calculated provocation, close enough to constitute a serious territorial violation, but executed with body language that suggests testing rather than invasion. The response options include escalation to direct confrontation, tactical withdrawal to avoid conflict, or the more complex diplomatic maneuver of graduated response that matches the level of challenge without exceeding it. Your choice is graduated response. One crow from your party launches from its perch and executes a close flyby of the challenging raven, near enough to demonstrate serious territorial commitment, fast enough to avoid physical contact if the raven decides to strike. The maneuver serves multiple communication functions. It shows willingness to take personal risks for territorial defense. It demonstrates flight skills that could prove dangerous in sustained conflict, and it maintains the option for de-escalation if the ravens choose to withdraw. The raven's reaction provides crucial intelligence about their intentions and capabilities. Rather than striking at your passing scout or escalating to direct aggression, the large male produces a call sequence that seems to acknowledge the territorial message while asserting continued claim to foraging rights in the disputed area. This is sophisticated communication that suggests experienced territorial negotiators rather than young ravens testing boundaries through inexperience. The negotiation continues through a series of measured exchanges that gradually establish the day's territorial agreement. The ravens accept restriction to the outer edge of the disputed zone in exchange for unimpeded foraging access to the garbage cans. Your scouting party maintains visual surveillance while allowing the foraging to continue. Both sides avoid actions that would trigger escalation while preserving core territorial claims for future negotiation. Food source diplomacy emerges when the raven's foraging reveals a substantial cache of meat scraps that exceeds their immediate consumption capacity. Sharing protocols become relevant, not from altruism, but from the practical recognition that defended resources sometimes exceed defenders' ability to fully exploit them. The raven's behavior suggests willingness to tolerate crow access to surplus food in exchange for reduced territorial pressure. The arrangement that develops is temporary and conditional but mutually beneficial. The ravens maintain primary access to the richest food sources, while crows gain secondary access to overflow resources. Both species benefit from shared vigilance against common threats: hawks who prey on corvids of all sizes, humans who might disperse the foraging opportunity, or competitors from other species who might attempt to exploit the abundant food source. Cognitive comparison becomes apparent during the negotiation process. Ravens demonstrate problem-solving approaches that emphasize individual intelligence and innovative tool use. Crows rely more heavily on social coordination and collective decision-making that distributes cognitive load across multiple individuals. Both approaches have advantages in different contexts, and observing raven techniques sometimes provides insights that can be adapted to crow social structures. The territorial agreement holds through the afternoon foraging period. but both sides understand its temporary nature. Tomorrow might bring different circumstances, changed resource availability, or altered territorial pressures that require renegotiation of the boundary arrangement. Corvid diplomacy operates on daily cycles that accommodate the dynamic nature of urban resource distribution and the complex social factors that influence territorial behavior. As evening approaches and foraging opportunities diminish, the ravens withdraw toward their own territorial core, while your scouting party maintains position until the withdrawal is complete. The boundary zone returns to its typical quiet state, marked by scent traces and memory of conflict, but temporarily peaceful. The negotiation has ended without violence, with resources shared according to relative strength and negotiating skill, and with territorial claims preserved for both species. The encounter provides valuable intelligence about raven capabilities, intentions, and negotiating patterns that will inform future territorial decisions. The experience also reinforces social bonds within your scouting party through shared risk and successful cooperation under pressure. Most importantly, the diplomatic resolution preserves energy and avoids injuries that could prove costly during the ongoing challenges of urban survival. In Corvid society, successful negotiation often represents superior adaptation compared to the alternative of territorial warfare that benefits no one except the scavengers who clean up after defeated combatants. Afternoon, in the Pine Grove workshop. The Pine Grove stands like a natural cathedral, its towering columns reaching toward filtered sunlight that creates pools of warm illumination scattered across the needle-carpeted floor. This is your sanctuary, the place where the urgent demands of survival give way to the quieter necessities of self-maintenance and restoration. The afternoon light slants through the evergreen canopy at precisely the angle that transforms this grove into a spa, a workshop, and a meditation retreat, all combined into one perfect environment for the essential but often overlooked activities that keep a crow's body and mind in optimal condition. You select a perch on a horizontal branch, perhaps 20 feet above the ground, positioned where a gap in the canopy allows direct sunlight to warm your feathers, while the surrounding trees provide security from aerial predators. The branch is thick enough to support your weight without swaying, textured enough to provide secure grip, and angled to allow comfortable positioning for the extended grooming session ahead. This is not random perch selection. This is choosing the right tool for a specialized job that requires both comfort and safety. Preening begins with systematic inspection of your primary flight feathers, the large wing feathers that bear the mechanical stress of flight, and therefore demand the most careful maintenance. Each feather receives individual attention as you work from wingtip toward body, using your beak's precise tip to realign barbs that have separated during the day's activities. The process requires flexibility, patience, and the kind of detailed attention that would exhaust most creatures, but comes naturally to corvids whose survival depends on maintaining peak physical condition. The technique involves gripping each feather gently at its base, while drawing your beak along its length, pressing the separated barbs back together through a zipping motion that restores the feather's aerodynamic integrity. Damaged barbs get smoothed or removed entirely, depending on the extent of wear. Oil from the preen gland at the base of your tail gets distributed along each feather shaft, providing waterproofing and flexibility that keeps your plumage functional in all weather conditions. Moving from flight feathers to body contour feathers requires different techniques adapted to different functions. The smaller feathers that provide insulation and streamlining receive rapid but thorough attention, fluffed and settled according to the ambient temperature and your body's thermal needs. The specialized feathers around your eyes and beak get delicate cleaning that removes accumulated debris without damaging the sensitive structures they protect. Sunbathing becomes an active component of the grooming process as you position yourself to take advantage of the warming rays that penetrate the canopy. Direct sunlight serves multiple maintenance functions. It helps dry any moisture trapped in your plumage, It encourages parasites to become active and exposed where they can be removed, and it provides the vitamin D synthesis that keeps your bones strong and your immune system functional. The warmth also relaxes muscles and joints that carry the constant tension of predator alertness. The pine grove's acoustics create a natural early warning system that allows deep relaxation without compromising safety. The soft whisper of wind through needles masks small movements but amplifies the larger sounds that might indicate approaching threats. The carpet of fallen needles muffles footsteps from ground predators while providing tactile feedback through the branch system that communicates the presence of climbing threats like cats or raccoons. Parasite control becomes active hunting as you systematically search through your plumage for the mites, lice, and other tiny hitchhikers that attempt to establish residence on your body. Each discovered parasite gets removed with surgical precision, crushed between mandibles that can crack nuts, but operate with sufficient delicacy to avoid damaging your own skin. This is maintenance that can't be postponed. Parasites drain energy, spread disease, and compromise plumage function if allowed to multiply unchecked. Dust bathing opportunities present themselves in the sandy soil beneath the pine canopy, where needle accumulation has prevented grass growth. You drop to the ground for a vigorous dust bath that involves spreading wings and tail, settling into loose soil, and using rapid scratching motions to work abrasive particles throughout your plumage. The dust absorbs excess oils, scours away debris, and creates an environment hostile to parasites, while providing the mechanical cleaning that complements chemical preening. Feather wear assessment occupies the analytical portion of your grooming routine as you evaluate the condition of critical plumage and plan for future molt cycles. Flight feathers show predictable wear patterns that indicate when replacement will become necessary. Tail feathers that provide steering control get special attention for damage that could compromise maneuverability during emergency situations. Body contour feathers are evaluated for insulation efficiency as seasons change and thermal demands shift. The grove provides social grooming opportunities when other crows arrive for their own maintenance sessions. Mutual preening allows access to areas like the back of the head and neck that are difficult to reach during solo grooming. The social interaction also reinforces pair bonds and flock relationships through cooperative behavior that builds trust and demonstrates mutual care. Grooming partnerships often extend beyond simple feather maintenance into information sharing and alliance building. Mental restoration accompanies physical maintenance as the quiet environment and repetitive grooming activities induce a meditative state that processes the day's experiences and consolidates important memories. The afternoon's territorial negotiations get reviewed and analyzed. Food source discoveries get encoded for future reference. Threat encounters are evaluated for lessons that might improve survival responses. The grove becomes a natural classroom where experience transforms into wisdom. Napping opportunities emerge as grooming reaches completion, and the warm afternoon light creates drowsiness that signals your body's need for rest and recovery. Brief sleep periods allow physiological restoration, while the grove's security features and your own alertness systems maintain protection against surprise attacks. Even in sleep, one eye remains partially open and oriented toward the most likely approach routes for potential threats. Temperature regulation becomes an ongoing adjustment process as the afternoon progresses and sunlight angles change. You shift position on your perch to maintain optimal thermal comfort, sometimes moving to cooler shadows when heating becomes excessive, sometimes following bright patches as the sun's angle changes. Your plumage provides fine control through fluffing and settling that maintains core body temperature within narrow ranges despite environmental fluctuations. The grove's ecosystem provides entertainment and learning opportunities as you observe the complex interactions between pine trees, soil organisms, insects, and other wildlife that share this habitat. Beetle larvae working beneath bark create potential food sources for future visits. Squirrel behavior patterns reveal information about nut storage locations that might be worth investigating. Bird species that frequent the grove provide comparative intelligence about their foraging techniques and territorial boundaries. As afternoon fades toward evening, your maintenance session approaches natural completion. Feathers are clean, aligned, and properly oiled. Parasites have been eliminated or reduced to manageable levels. Your body has been warmed, rested, and restored to peak condition. The psychological benefits of quiet time in a beautiful, secure environment have recharged mental resources depleted by the constant vigilance that urban survival demands. The grove will remain available for future maintenance sessions, its pine trees providing reliable shelter, and its ecosystem offering the resources necessary for COVID self-care. This afternoon's investment in physical and mental maintenance pays dividends in enhanced flight performance, improved thermoregulation, reduced disease risk, and the psychological resilience that comes from taking time to restore oneself in the midst of survival's relentless demands. You launch from your perch refreshed and ready for evening activities, carrying with you the renewed vigor that comes from proper self-maintenance and the calm confidence that emerges from spending quality time in one of nature's most peaceful environments. Human Watch. Faces you never forget. Your database of human facial recognition contains hundreds of individual entries, each tagged with behavioral patterns, threat assessments, and historical interactions that determine appropriate response protocols. Humans believe they all look alike to animals, but your visual processing system discriminates between individuals with accuracy that would impress any security expert. The woman with the gray hair and blue coat gets enthusiastic approach behavior because she's the reliable peanut dispenser who appears at the park every Tuesday and Friday. The teenager with the red baseball cap triggers immediate evasion protocols because he's the one who threw rocks and chased you from the playground 3 months ago. Memory for human faces operates on multiple timescales and serves different survival functions. Short-term recognition handles daily interactions with individuals who might affect immediate foraging success or safety. Medium-term memory tracks patterns in human behavior that create predictable opportunities or hazards. Long-term storage preserves information about significant positive or negative encounters that could influence survival for years to come. The elderly man who rescued you from fishing line entanglement 5 years ago still receives trusted status, while the woman who destroyed your nest remains flagged as permanent threat. Reading human body language requires translation across species barriers, but certain signals transcend biological differences. Rapid movements suggest agitation or aggressive intent. Slow, deliberate motions often accompany feeding behaviors or benign observation. Eye contact patterns reveal attention and intention. Direct stares usually mean trouble, while averted gazes suggest indifference or distraction. Hand positions provide crucial information about potential threats or food offerings, and you've learned to distinguish between empty hands, hidden objects, and the distinctive posture that precedes projectile throwing. The park regular, who arrives each morning at 7:30, has earned classification as reliable ally through months of consistent positive interactions. She carries a small bag containing unsalted peanuts, moves slowly to avoid startling wildlife, and maintains respectful distances that allow comfortable approach. Her arrival triggers anticipatory behavior that brings you to the park's entrance area before she's fully visible, demonstrating how human schedule recognition integrates with foraging strategy. Teaching young crows proper human assessment protocols requires demonstration of both positive and negative examples. The approach distance for the friendly peanut lady might be 6 feet, close enough to receive offered food, far enough for quick escape if behavior changes unexpectedly. The safe distance from aggressive humans extends to 50 feet or more, with escape routes pre-planned and multiple exit strategies maintained. Juvenile crows learn these distinctions through observation and gradually increase their own interaction comfort levels based on accumulated positive or negative experiences. Clothing serves as secondary identification when facial features are obscured by distance or environmental conditions. The male carrier's uniform reliably predicts neutral behavior and predictable routes that create foraging opportunities around delivery schedules. Construction workers' hard hats and reflective vests signal environments with scattered food scraps, but also dangerous machinery and unpredictable noise levels. Police uniforms have become associated with increased human activity and potential territorial disruption, requiring elevated caution levels until the situation resolves. Seasonal behavior changes in familiar humans provide insights into environmental patterns that affect corvid survival. The woman who feeds birds religiously during winter often reduces or eliminates feeding during summer months when natural food sources become abundant. The jogger who maintains consistent morning routes during pleasant weather disappears during harsh conditions, eliminating both his presence as a territorial marker and any associated food opportunities from discarded energy bar wrappers. Technology integration has complicated human behavior in ways that create new opportunities and challenges for corvid observation. Humans absorbed in mobile devices show reduced environmental awareness that allows closer approach for food acquisition or territorial monitoring. However, the same devices can suddenly transform into photo or video recording equipment that may or may not represent threats, depending on user intent. Learning to distinguish between benign documentation and hostile recording requires ongoing behavioral analysis. Revenge planning occupies a specialized category of human-directed behavior that demonstrates corvid capacity for complex social cognition and delayed gratification. The businessman who consistently drives aggressively through your territory receives targeted harassment that includes precise droppings placement on his freshly washed car, systematic theft of shiny objects from his outdoor spaces, and coordinated alarm calling that disrupts his attempts at peaceful outdoor activities. These actions require planning, timing, and coordination that transform individual grievances into community responses. Children represent a unique challenge for human assessment because their behavior patterns differ significantly from adult norms, and their physical capabilities change rapidly over time. Young children often lack the motor control necessary for accurate projectile throwing, making them relatively safe even when their intentions are hostile. However, they're also unpredictable, loud, and prone to sudden movements that can trigger defensive responses. Additionally, negative interactions with children often bring adult intervention that escalates conflict beyond the original incident. Vehicle association adds another layer to human recognition when individuals can be linked to specific cars, trucks, or motorcycles. The red pickup truck that consistently yields right-of-way at the intersection earns positive associations that extend to its human operator. The sports car whose driver repeatedly accelerates aggressively through your foraging areas becomes a mobile threat, requiring evasive action whenever its distinctive engine sound approaches. Vehicle recognition allows threat assessment to begin before human occupants become visible. Group dynamics among humans create complex scenarios that require rapid assessment of multiple individuals with potentially conflicting behavioral patterns. A family group might include children who pose minimal direct threat, adults who show neutral or positive behavior, and teenagers whose intentions remain unpredictable. Navigating these mixed signal situations requires constant monitoring and flexible response strategies that can adapt quickly if group dynamics shift toward hostility. Feeding ethics among human bird enthusiasts create opportunities and complications that require sophisticated social navigation. Some humans provide appropriate food types in reasonable quantities at consistent times and locations. Others offer inappropriate foods, create dependency relationships, or attract excessive crow numbers that strain local carrying capacity. Learning to distinguish between beneficial and problematic feeding relationships helps maintain positive human interactions while avoiding situations that could lead to conflict or community backlash. Law enforcement interactions have taught important lessons about human authority structures and appropriate response protocols. Police officers responding to crow problems typically lack specialized wildlife knowledge, but possess equipment and legal authority that can create serious consequences for corvid communities. Understanding official human behavior patterns helps avoid situations that might trigger formal responses while maintaining access to territories that provide essential resources. Weather influences human behavior in predictable ways that affect corvid foraging and territorial strategies. Rain sends humans indoors, reducing foot traffic and eliminating many feeding opportunities while increasing the safety of ground foraging in normally busy areas. Snow creates emergency conditions where some humans provide extra bird feeding, while others become more focused on personal survival and less tolerant of wildlife presence. Your mental catalogue of human individuals continues expanding throughout your life, with new entries added regularly and existing records updated based on changing circumstances or repeated interactions. This database represents one of your most valuable survival resources, enabling sophisticated social navigation in an environment where humans control most resources and pose most threats. The ability to remember friends and enemies, predict behavior patterns, and plan appropriate responses transforms random human encounters into managed social interactions that often favor corvid interests when properly executed. The shiny thing compulsion. The glint catches your eye from 60 feet away, a brief flash of reflected light that triggers responses buried so deep in corvid neurology that resistance feels impossible. Logic insists this is probably worthless debris, a candy wrapper, a piece of broken glass, maybe just water pooled on a flat surface. But logic has no power over the compulsion that draws your attention to bright, reflective objects with magnetic intensity. Your flight path bends toward the shiny thing before conscious decision-making processes fully engage, demonstrating the power of instincts that evolution embedded in corvid brains millions of years before humans invented the artificial sparkle that now captivates and confuses your kind. The approach requires tactical consideration, despite the overwhelming urge to investigate immediately. Shiny objects often lie in exposed locations where their reflective properties make them visible from great distances. This same visibility makes any crow approaching them equally conspicuous to predators, competitors, and humans who might object to corvid treasure collection. Your descent follows a spiral pattern that allows threat assessment while gradually closing distance to the irresistible gleam that draws you forward against better judgment. Closer inspection reveals a discarded aluminum can partially buried in roadside debris, its surface catching afternoon sunlight and throwing brilliant reflections with each slight movement caused by passing air currents. The object has no obvious value. It's too large to cache effectively, too light to serve any practical function, and absolutely inedible despite the beverage residue that might cling to its interior. Yet, the compulsion to possess it continues unabated, driven by neural circuits that seem immune to rational cost-benefit analysis. The evolutionary roots of this obsession remain mysterious even to corvid consciousness. Perhaps bright objects once signaled valuable resources like water sources or useful materials. Maybe the attraction stems from the same neural pathways that govern food recognition, misfiring in response to artificial stimuli that didn't exist when these circuits first evolved. Or possibly the behavior serves current functions that remain opaque to individual understanding: social signaling, nest decoration, or trade currency in complex corvid economies. Possession brings immediate satisfaction despite the object's obvious worthlessness. Your talons grip the aluminum surface, and the metal responds with a satisfying crinkle that creates additional acoustic interest. The weight is negligible, making transport feasible even during extended flight. The surface provides endless visual entertainment, as changing angles create shifting patterns of reflection that seem to move and dance with independent life. Logic recognizes meaningless light patterns, but deeper brain structures respond as if witnessing something genuinely magical. Transport considerations become paramount once possession is achieved. The aluminum can's size and shape make normal flight awkward, requiring modified wing positions and altered aerodynamics that reduce efficiency and increase vulnerability during transit. Carrying large objects also prevents quick escapes if threats materialize during the journey home. Yet abandoning the treasure feels impossible despite these practical disadvantages, forcing compromise solutions that balance safety against the overpowering need to retain possession. Cache selection for shiny objects follows different criteria than food storage protocols. Edible items require protection from moisture, temperature extremes, and competing scavengers. Shiny treasures need security from theft by other crows, while remaining accessible for frequent visits that serve no apparent purpose beyond the satisfaction of ownership. The ideal cache site provides concealment from casual observation, while allowing easy verification that the treasure remains undisturbed. Your chosen hiding spot occupies a tree hollow formed where a broken branch created a natural cavity in the oak's trunk. The opening faces away from prevailing winds and human observation points, while remaining accessible from multiple approach angles. Previous deposits already occupy portions of the space. A collection of bottle caps, several pieces of colored glass, worn smooth by weather, a small metal washer, and the prize discovery from last month, a child's lost bracelet that produces rainbow reflections when sunlight hits its crystal beads. Treasure management requires periodic inspection visits that serve psychological rather than practical functions. Unlike food caches that deteriorate, if not consumed promptly, shiny objects maintain their appeal indefinitely, perhaps even improving with age, as patina and weathering create new reflective properties. The inspection ritual involves removing each item from storage, examining it in current lighting conditions, and experiencing again the satisfaction that comes from ownership of beautiful, useless things. The social dimensions of shiny object obsession create complex dynamics within corvid communities. Public display of exceptional treasures can enhance status and attract potential mates, but the same displays also invite theft attempts from less successful collectors. Balancing the benefits of showing off against the risks of robbery requires careful judgment about audience composition and security arrangements. Some crows develop reputations as serious collectors, while others focus their acquisitive energies on more practical resources. Trade networks sometimes emerge around particularly desirable objects that individual crows cannot obtain through direct collection. The crow who discovers access to a construction site with abundant metal scraps might exchange surplus materials for information about food sources, territorial intelligence, or reproductive opportunities. These transactions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of value relationships that extend beyond immediate utility into complex social currencies. Mate selection occasionally involves evaluation of potential partners' collecting abilities and treasure quality. A suitor who presents exceptional gifts during courtship demonstrates both aesthetic sensibility and the competence required to obtain difficult items. The female who maintains an impressive cache shows organizational skills and resource control that could benefit offspring survival. Shiny object accumulation becomes one factor among many in the complex calculations that govern corvid reproductive decisions. The psychological mechanisms underlying treasure obsession appear to operate independently of rational satisfaction analysis. Even crows with extensive collections continue seeking additional items with undiminished enthusiasm. Successful acquisition provides temporary gratification, but the compulsion returns quickly and sometimes intensifies rather than diminishing through repeated satisfaction. This pattern suggests neurological reward systems that evolved for different purposes, but respond to artificial stimuli in ways that create seemingly irrational behavioral loops. Seasonal variations affect both collection opportunities and psychological need intensity. Winter's reduced foraging demands create more time and energy available for non-essential activities like treasure hunting. Spring's reproductive pressures often redirect attention toward practical nesting materials and courtship activities. Summer's abundant food supplies allow balanced attention to both survival necessities and collection hobbies. Autumn's preparation demands typically reduced time available for purely aesthetic pursuits. Risk assessment for shiny object collection requires weighing psychological benefits against practical costs and dangers. Pursuing treasure in dangerous locations can result in injury, death, or energy expenditure that compromises survival. However, the compulsion can be so strong that crows take risks for shiny objects that they would never accept for equivalent amounts of food or other practical resources. This disconnect between rational risk analysis and emotional drive demonstrates the power of evolutionary programming that operates below conscious control. Your return flight from the cache site carries the satisfaction of successful treasure acquisition and proper storage security. The aluminum conjoins your collection as another meaningless but beautiful addition to an accumulation that serves no clear purpose, except the deep psychological reward that comes from possessing objects that capture and reflect light in ways that speak to ancient neural circuits embedded in corvid consciousness. The compulsion remains active, scanning the environment for future opportunities to expand your collection with new discoveries that will provide the same mysterious satisfaction that defies rational explanation but feels absolutely essential to psychological well-being. Stormfront survival drill. The barometric pressure change hits your inner ear like a physical blow, signaling the approach of weather systems still hours away from human detection. Your bones ache with the atmospheric shift, an early warning system inherited from ancestors who survived or perished based on their ability to read environmental signs that foretold dangerous conditions. The western sky remains deceptively clear, but your body insists that violent weather approaches with the certainty of a tidal wave moving across invisible atmospheric seas. The pre-storm checklist begins immediately, driven by instincts that brook no delay when survival hangs in the balance. Food caches scattered throughout your territory require immediate security assessment and possible relocation before high winds and flooding compromise their accessibility. The acorns buried beneath the maple roots should remain stable, but the bread scraps cached in the old bird feeder need immediate consumption or transfer to more secure storage before moisture destroys their nutritional value. Wind direction indicators provide crucial intelligence about the storm's likely path and intensity. The way grass bends in the increasingly gusty air masses, the pattern of leaf movement in different tree species, and the behavior of smoke from human chimneys all contribute to your meteorological analysis. This storm approaches from the northwest, which means the heaviest precipitation will hit the exposed eastern slopes, where several of your secondary food caches await protection or evacuation. Emergency roost selection becomes critical when normal sleeping sites prove inadequate for severe weather survival. Your regular perch in the oak tree offers excellent visibility and escape routes during normal conditions, but exposure to high winds could prove fatal if branches break or the entire tree becomes unstable. The storm shelter you're mentally reviewing sits deep within a grove of closely spaced evergreens whose interlocking branches provide mutual support and wind deflection. The first distant thunder rumble confirms your atmospheric pressure readings and accelerates preparation activities. Thunder means lightning, and lightning means the possibility of fire, tree strikes, and electromagnetic disturbances that can disorient navigation systems. More immediately, it signals that the main storm system will arrive within an hour or two, requiring completion of all safety preparations before conditions deteriorate beyond the point where emergency movement becomes impossible. Cache consolidation requires rapid decision-making about which stored resources deserve protection and which must be abandoned to weather damage. The collection of shiny objects hidden in the tree hollow needs no protection. Metal and glass can survive storm conditions that would destroy organic materials. But the emergency seed cache buried near the playground sits in low ground that floods during heavy rain, requiring immediate retrieval and transfer to higher, drier storage locations. Your mate appears at the predetermined rally point, carrying intelligence about conditions in her sector of the territory. The storm's approach has been detected by the entire Corvid community, and information sharing becomes essential for collective survival. Her report indicates that the creek is already rising from upstream precipitation, confirming that this system carries substantial moisture and poses flooding risks to ground-level resources. Communication with neighboring crows establishes mutual aid agreements that could prove crucial if the storm damages territories or displaces birds from their normal ranges. The family group in the adjacent territory agrees to temporary boundary adjustments if storm damage forces evacuation from primary roosting sites. These arrangements require trust and reciprocity that extend beyond immediate crisis management into long-term community relationships. Wind speed increases dramatically as the storm front approaches, bending trees to angles that demonstrate the power building in the atmosphere. Flying becomes increasingly dangerous as gusts create turbulence that can slam birds into obstacles or exhaust their energy reserves, fighting unpredictable air currents. The window for safe movement between territories is closing rapidly, forcing final decisions about storm shelter selection and emergency supply positioning. The chosen shelter occupies the densest section of the pine grove, where a cluster of mature trees creates a natural windbreak reinforced by years of intergrown branches. The site provides multiple escape routes if individual trees fail, overhead cover that deflects rain and hail, and enough space for several crows to ride out the storm without territorial conflicts. Previous storm experience has confirmed this location's reliability during severe weather events. Lightning begins striking closer to your position, the electromagnetic discharge creating ozone sense and electromagnetic fields that affect your navigation senses. The gaps between lightning flash and thunder crash shrink steadily, indicating the storm center's approach. Soon, the rain will begin in earnest, transforming the landscape into a hostile environment where survival depends on advanced preparation and patient endurance rather than active foraging or territorial defense. The first heavy raindrops mark the beginning of the survival phase, when all preparation activities cease and focus shifts to enduring conditions that could persist for hours or days. Your position in the shelter provides protection from direct precipitation while maintaining visual contact with other crows sharing the emergency roost. Social support during crisis situations can mean the difference between survival and psychological breakdown that leads to fatal decision-making. Temperature management becomes critical as rain and wind combine to create severe chill factors that can rapidly drain body heat. Your feathers provide excellent insulation when properly maintained, but driving rain can penetrate plumage and conduct heat away from vital organs. Behavioral adjustments include fluffing feathers to trap warm air, positioning to minimize wind exposure, and periodic movement to maintain circulation without exposing yourself to the worst weather conditions. Food rationing begins as the storm's duration becomes apparent through the sustained intensity of wind and precipitation. Emergency food supplies cached near the shelter must last until normal foraging can resume safely. Overconsumption early in the storm could leave you vulnerable to starvation if conditions persist longer than expected. Conservation strategies balance immediate energy needs against uncertain future requirements. Sleep becomes almost impossible during the storm's peak intensity, when wind noise drowns out the acoustic warning systems that normally alert you to approaching threats. The constant environmental chaos creates stress responses that keep adrenaline levels elevated and prevent the deep rest that normally restores energy reserves. Microsleep periods provide minimal restoration while maintaining enough alertness to respond to emergency situations. The storm's psychological effects can prove as dangerous as its physical challenges. Extended periods of helplessness and exposure to chaotic environmental conditions create stress that can impair judgment and decision-making abilities. Maintaining mental discipline requires focusing on survival tasks, conserving emotional energy, and avoiding the panic responses that lead to fatal mistakes during crisis situations. Recovery planning begins even before the storm reaches peak intensity, as preparation for post-storm conditions requires different strategies than weathering the immediate crisis. Territorial boundaries may shift if storm damage displaces other crows. Food sources could be destroyed or newly created by environmental changes. Navigation landmarks might be altered or eliminated, requiring mental map updates and new route establishment. As the storm's intensity gradually diminishes and wind speeds decrease to manageable levels, the first tentative emergence from shelter allows assessment of damage and opportunities created by the weather event. Survival success will be measured not just by weathering the immediate crisis, but by how effectively you can adapt to the changed environment that emerges from nature's violent reshaping of the landscape, where you must continue the ongoing business of staying alive. Winter rationing, snow tricks. The snow crust supports your weight for 3 steps before breaking through into the softer layer beneath, sending powder cascading around your legs and reminding you that winter travel requires constant adaptation to changing surface conditions. Below this pristine white blanket lie the buried treasures that represent the difference between surviving until spring and joining the casualties that mark each harsh season's toll on the corvid population. Your autumn caching efforts scattered dozens of food stores throughout the territory, but retrieving them through snow coverage requires memory, technique, and the kind of methodical patience that goes against every instinct screaming for immediate caloric relief. The search begins with landmark navigation, complicated by snow's ability to transform familiar landscapes into alien terrain. The distinctive rock formation that marked your largest acorn cache now appears as a white mound, indistinguishable from dozens of similar snow-covered shapes. The fallen log that concealed emergency seed stores has become part of an undifferentiated ridge of white that stretches across what was once clearly defined forest floor. Winter navigation requires mental flexibility that can translate 3-dimensional landmark memories into 2-dimensional snow-obscured approximations. Excavation technique determines whether cache retrieval expends more energy than it recovers. Random digging burns precious calories without guarantee of success, potentially leading to the downward energy spiral that kills more winter birds than outright starvation. Systematic search patterns maximize success probability while minimizing energy expenditure, beginning with careful observation of subtle snow surface variations that might indicate underlying objects or disturbed soil from autumn burial activities. Your claws work through the snow layers with archaeological precision, each scrape bringing you closer to the buried acorns that could provide a day's worth of concentrated nutrition. The top layer consists of powder that formed during last night's snowfall, easy to move, but providing no information about what lies beneath. The middle layer contains older, denser snow that has partially melted and refrozen, creating resistance that requires more effort to penetrate, but offering tactile feedback about underlying objects and soil conditions. Success comes suddenly when your claw encounters the hard surface of buried nuts, and careful excavation reveals the cache exactly where your spatial memory insisted it should be. 17 acorns emerge from their winter hiding place, each one representing concentrated fats and carbohydrates that can fuel several hours of winter survival. The discovery validates your memory systems and provides psychological satisfaction that extends beyond mere caloric value into confirmation of competence and preparation. Traffic presents both opportunity and mortal danger as winter conditions alter the risk-benefit calculations that govern urban foraging strategies. Cars move more slowly on icy roads, providing extended opportunities to position nuts and other hard-shelled foods where vehicle tires can crack them open. But the same icy conditions that slow traffic also reduce driver control and reaction times, making miscalculated approaches potentially fatal. Winter traffic technique requires precise timing and multiple escape route planning. The intersection of Maple and 3rd Street provides the optimal balance between traffic density and safety margins for winter nut-cracking operations. You position an acorn carefully in the tire path of the approaching sedan, ensuring proper placement for maximum crushing efficiency while maintaining position for rapid food recovery. The technique requires reading driver behavior, vehicle approach speed, and road surface conditions to predict exact tire placement with split-second timing. Success produces an explosion of shell fragments and accessible nut meat that represents significant caloric gain for minimal energy expenditure. Immediate consumption becomes critical because exposed food in urban environments attracts competitors ranging from other corvids to urban-adapted mammals who recognize the sound of successful nut-cracking operations. Speed and efficiency in food recovery often determine whether the benefits of traffic technique translate into actual nutritional gain. Snow also creates opportunities for food preservation and storage that extend natural refrigeration capabilities. Meat scraps that would spoil rapidly in warmer weather can be cached in snowbanks, where sub-freezing temperatures preserve nutritional value for extended periods. The technique requires understanding snow layer dynamics, drainage patterns, and temperature stability to ensure that preserved food remains accessible and unspoiled when recovery becomes necessary. Energy conservation becomes the dominant strategy governing all winter activities, from flight path selection to social interaction patterns. Every calorie burned must be justified by survival necessity or caloric gain that exceeds expenditure. Unnecessary territorial displays get postponed until spring, when energy budgets allow social competition. Extended flights are avoided unless they promise substantial food rewards. Even preening gets rationed to essential maintenance levels that preserve flight capability without wasting precious energy on cosmetic improvements. Behavioral adaptations include increased social tolerance that allows resource-sharing arrangements impossible during territory-rich seasons. The crow family, normally banned from your best foraging areas, might receive temporary access privileges in exchange for information about food sources discovered in their territory. Winter survival often depends on social networks that pool knowledge and distribute risks across larger groups than individual territories can support. Weather prediction becomes crucial for timing, foraging activities, and shelter selection, as winter storms can trap crows in exposed locations where survival becomes impossible. Cloud patterns, wind direction changes, and atmospheric pressure variations provide advance warning of approaching weather systems that could affect travel safety and food availability. Reading these signs allows proactive positioning that avoids the worst conditions rather than reactive responses that waste energy on emergency survival measures. Feather management requires constant attention, as insulation effectiveness determines survival chances during extreme cold events. Proper feather arrangement creates air pockets that trap body heat and prevent wind penetration, but the system requires frequent adjustment as daily activities disturb optimal positioning. Puffed feathers provide maximum insulation at the cost of increased wind resistance during flight, forcing constant trade-offs between thermal comfort and aerodynamic efficiency. Ice formation creates both obstacles and opportunities depending on location and thickness. Thin ice over water sources prevents access to essential drinking water, while thick ice can support your wait for access to resources normally protected by water barriers. Learning to assess ice safety requires experience with surface appearance, ambient temperature, and the acoustic signatures that distinguish supportive ice from dangerous thin layers that could lead to drowning. Sunrise timing becomes crucial for maximizing the limited daylight hours available for foraging and territorial maintenance. Winter's shortened days compress all survival activities into narrow time windows between dawn and dusk, requiring efficient scheduling that prioritizes essential tasks over optional activities. The luxury of leisurely afternoon maintenance sessions disappears in favor of focused execution of survival-critical behaviors. Sun patches provide thermal relief that can reduce energy expenditure required for maintaining core body temperature. Seeking and utilizing these temporary warm zones requires tracking solar angles and understanding how building shadows, terrain features, and vegetation create microclimates that offer significant thermal advantages. Strategic positioning in sun-warmed areas can extend effective foraging time and reduce the caloric costs of winter survival. Your winter survival depends on the accumulated wisdom of preparation, the physical resources of cached food stores, and the behavioral flexibility that allows adaptation to conditions that push corvid capabilities to their limits. Each successful day represents victory over environmental challenges that eliminate the unprepared, the unlucky, and the inflexible members of your species who lack the combination of intelligence, preparation, and endurance that winter survival demands. The snow continues falling, adding new layers to the existing accumulation and creating tomorrow's navigation challenges. But your systematic approach to winter survival provides confidence that spring will find you among the survivors who successfully navigated the harsh season's trials. Spring courtship, quiet devotion. The subtle shift in your internal chemistry begins before any external signs announce winter's retreat. Hormonal changes that transform your priorities from mere survival toward the ancient imperatives of reproduction and species continuation. Your territorial behavior intensifies as increasing daylight triggers neurological cascades that prepare mind and body for the complex social negotiations that govern corvid pair formation. The same intelligence that guides foraging strategies and predator avoidance now turns toward evaluating potential mates according to criteria that balance genetic fitness, resource control capability, and the behavioral compatibility necessary for successful cooperative breeding. Mate selection operates through extended evaluation periods that test candidates across multiple dimensions of corvid competence. Physical condition provides obvious indicators of genetic quality and environmental adaptation, but intelligence assessment requires observation of problem-solving abilities, territorial knowledge, and social skills that could affect offspring survival. The female who demonstrates innovative foraging techniques and maintains extensive cache networks shows promise as a provider and teacher. The male who successfully defends valuable territory while avoiding unnecessary conflicts displays the balanced aggression optimal for family protection. Your courtship display begins with offerings that demonstrate both resource access and aesthetic sensibility. The perfect twig selected for presentation must meet multiple criteria: appropriate size and flexibility for nest construction, harvested from a tree species known for structural integrity, and presented with the timing and ceremony that shows understanding of courtship protocols. But material gifts alone cannot secure pair bonds that must withstand the stresses of breeding season competition and chick-rearing cooperation. Vocal courtship involves subtle variations on standard crow calls that communicate emotional states and pair bonding intentions difficult to translate into human concepts. The soft, rattling sounds that accompany gift presentation carry information about hormonal readiness, territorial security, and commitment levels that potential mates evaluate according to their own reproductive schedules and partner requirements. Successful courtship requires matching these complex vocal patterns with behavioral demonstrations that prove capability and reliability. Mutual preening represents the first physical intimacy in developing pair bonds, an activity that requires extraordinary trust given corvid vulnerability during detailed feather maintenance. The delicate work of aligning feathers around your partner's head and neck areas demands precise beak control and gentle pressure that could easily become aggression in different contexts. The willingness to allow such intimate access communicates trust levels that form the foundation for cooperative breeding arrangements. Territory evaluation becomes a joint enterprise as potential pairs assess the resource base that will support their reproductive efforts. The female's inspection of your territorial boundaries, cache locations, and foraging sites serves multiple purposes: evaluating your competence as a provider, mapping resources that will become family assets, and testing your willingness to share previously exclusive knowledge with a reproductive partner. Her approval or rejection of territorial quality can determine pair formation success. Nest site selection requires consensus between partners whose individual preferences must yield to shared decision-making that optimizes safety, convenience, and environmental conditions for successful reproduction. The maple tree fork that offers excellent concealment might lack adequate escape routes if ground predators threaten the nest. The oak branch with superior structural support might be too exposed to aerial predators who specialize in corvid nest predation. Compromise and communication become essential for choices that affect offspring survival. Memory testing emerges as couples evaluate each other's cognitive capabilities through informal challenges that reveal intelligence, spatial awareness, and problem-solving skills. The female who successfully relocates food caches you showed her weeks earlier demonstrates memory capacity that could prove valuable for family resource management. The male who remembers your preferred foraging routes and timing preferences shows attention to detail that suggests reliable partnership potential. Competition from other crows adds urgency and complexity to courtship negotiations. As desirable mates attract multiple suitors, whose capabilities must be compared and evaluated. The rival male, whose territory borders yours, might offer superior resources or genetic advantages that challenge your courtship success. Competing requires demonstrating superiority across multiple dimensions, while avoiding conflicts that could result in injury, energy depletion, or territorial losses that reduce attractiveness to potential mates. The decision to commit represents a calculated risk that trading individual autonomy for cooperative partnership will enhance reproductive success compared to continued single status. Pair bonds require sharing territorial resources, coordinating daily activities, and accepting vulnerability that comes from emotional attachment to another individual whose survival affects your own reproductive potential. The benefits must outweigh substantial costs in independence and flexibility. Seasonal timing influences courtship intensity, as optimal breeding windows require coordination with environmental conditions that affect food availability, weather patterns, and predator activity cycles. Too early and harsh weather could kill eggs or nestlings before they develop sufficient resilience. Too late, and the breeding season's shortened days might not provide adequate time for offspring to achieve independence before winter's survival challenges begin. Ritualized behaviors strengthen pair bonds through shared activities that reinforce cooperation and communication patterns necessary for successful breeding. Synchronized flight displays demonstrate coordination and compatibility. Coordinated territorial defense tests partnership functionality under stress. Shared foraging activities establish division of labor patterns that will become essential during intensive chick feeding periods when efficiency determines offspring survival. Gift exchanges continue throughout pair formation, as both partners demonstrate their ability to provide resources and aesthetic objects that contribute to nest quality and psychological satisfaction. The ribbon scrap that adds color to nest construction serves no practical function, but indicates understanding of partner preferences and willingness to invest energy in non-essential activities that enhance quality of life within the partner. Pair bond. Trust development requires time and repeated positive interactions that build confidence in partner reliability and commitment. The moment when your mate allows you to approach while she's feeding represents a milestone in relationship development, indicating that competitive instincts have yielded to cooperative ones. Similarly, sharing the locations of your most valuable food caches demonstrates trust that extends beyond immediate reproductive cooperation into long-term partnership planning. Physical compatibility assessment includes evaluation of size differences, flight capabilities, and behavioral synchronization that could affect cooperative breeding success. Partners whose size and strength differ dramatically might face challenges in coordinated nest defense or efficient division of labor during intensive chick feeding periods. Behavioral compatibility affects everything from foraging efficiency to sleeping arrangements in shared roost sites. The gradual transition from courtship to established pair bond occurs through accumulated shared experiences that create emotional attachment and mutual dependence. The first successful joint defense of territorial boundaries establishes partnership functionality under stress. The first collaborative cache building demonstrates resource-sharing commitment. The first night spent roosting side by side represents vulnerability, acceptance that marks mature pair bond formation. Intelligence matching becomes apparent as partners test each other's problem-solving abilities through increasingly complex challenges that reveal cognitive compatibility. The female who matches your tool use innovations with her own creative solutions demonstrates intellectual partnership potential. The male who anticipates your foraging strategies and adapts his own behaviors accordingly shows cognitive flexibility that could enhance cooperative breeding success. Environmental assessment includes evaluation of territory quality, resource abundance, and safety factors that will determine reproductive success potential. The pair that chooses to breed in territory with abundant food sources and minimal predator pressure has better odds of successfully raising offspring to independence. Partners who disagree about environmental suitability might delay breeding until conditions improve or territory changes resolve compatibility conflicts. Your courtship culminates in the mutual decision to proceed with nest construction and egg production, a commitment that transforms individual survival priorities into family-focused cooperation that will dominate your lives for months to come. The quiet devotion that emerges from successful pair bonding creates psychological resources that enhance stress resistance and cooperative problem-solving throughout the demanding period ahead. Spring's promise of renewal becomes personal reality as partnership opens the possibility for genetic legacy and species continuation through another generation of corvid intelligence and adaptability. Nest engineering in the maple fork. The maple tree's architecture presents a natural engineering challenge that requires balancing structural integrity against concealment, accessibility against security, and environmental protection against escape route availability. The fork, where three substantial branches diverge from the main trunk, creates a triangular foundation space perfect for nest construction, but only if the engineering problems of load distribution, weather resistance, and predator deterrence can be solved through intelligent material selection and construction techniques that rival human architectural sophistication. Your initial site survey examines every aspect of the chosen location through multiple criteria that will determine nest success or failure. Wind exposure analysis reveals that the eastern approach receives full force from prevailing storm systems, requiring construction techniques that can withstand sustained high winds and driving rain. The southern orientation provides optimal solar exposure for egg incubation and chick warmth, but also creates visibility risks from ground-based observers who might threaten nest security. Foundation engineering begins with the careful placement of structural elements that will support the entire nest system through months of use, weather, stress, and the increasing weight of growing chicks. The first materials consist of rigid twigs selected for their load-bearing capacity rather than comfort or appearance. Each piece must fit precisely into the available space, while interlocking with adjacent elements to create a stable platform that distributes weight across all three supporting branches. Material procurement requires systematic gathering of construction supplies that meet specific engineering requirements for different nest components. The foundation layer demands straight, strong twigs from hardwood species that won't bend or break under load. The wall construction needs flexible materials that can be woven together to create wind-resistant barriers. The interior lining requires soft fibers that provide insulation and comfort for eggs and nestlings. Bark strips harvested from dead trees provide the primary wall material, offering flexibility during construction and durability throughout the breeding season. Your beak strips bark in precise widths that maximize weaving efficiency while maintaining structural integrity. The technique requires understanding wood grain patterns, moisture content effects on flexibility, and the specific handling methods that prevent material breakage during the delicate weaving process. Wire represents the most challenging and valuable construction material, offering unmatched structural properties but requiring specialized handling techniques to avoid injury and achieve proper integration with organic components. The piece of copper wire discovered near the construction site becomes a crucial structural element, but its installation requires careful bending and positioning to avoid creating hazards that could injure eggs or chicks during the nest's operational period. Moss collection involves identifying the specific species that provide optimal insulation properties while resisting decay and parasite infestation. The moss gathered from the north side of oak trees offers superior water absorption and retention characteristics that help maintain optimal humidity levels for egg development. Different moss species serve different functions, from structural support to comfort enhancement to antimicrobial protection that reduces disease risks. Interior design focuses on creating the bowl-shaped depression that will cradle eggs and nestlings throughout their development period. The curvature must be precise enough to prevent eggs from rolling out while providing adequate space for the clutch size your species typically produces. The depth creates security and wind protection while maintaining the accessibility necessary for efficient feeding and waste removal during chick rearing periods. Neighboring interference presents ongoing challenges as other species attempt to pilfer construction materials or harass building activities. Blue jays specialize in nest material theft, requiring constant vigilance and defensive measures that protect accumulated supplies. Squirrels investigate construction sites for potential den takeover opportunities, necessitating aggressive territorial defense during vulnerable building periods, when sustained construction work prevents extended territory patrols. Quality control involves continuous inspection and adjustment of construction work to ensure that engineering standards meet the survival requirements that will be tested during actual nesting use. Weak joints receive reinforcement before they fail under load. Inadequate weather protection gets additional material layers. Poor insulation gets enhanced with supplementary soft fibers. The investment in construction quality pays dividends throughout the demanding breeding season ahead. Tool use during construction includes specialized techniques for handling different materials and achieving precise placement in confined spaces. Your beak serves as needle, scissors, and hammer depending on construction requirements. Wing positions provide leverage for material manipulation and precise positioning. Foot placement allows delicate pressure application that shapes materials without damage. Architectural decisions require balancing conflicting requirements that have no perfect solutions. Increased concealment reduces visibility of approaching threats. Enhanced structural strength adds weight that might compromise branch stability. Improved accessibility for parents creates vulnerability to predators who might exploit the same entrance routes. Each design choice involves trade-offs that affect nest functionality and safety. Soft fiber collection focuses on materials that provide maximum comfort and insulation for the minimum weight and bulk. Pet fur collected from grooming areas offers exceptional warmth-to-weight ratios. Plant fibers from specific species provide water resistance and durability. Human textile scraps contribute color and texture variety that might serve camouflage or aesthetic functions depending on surrounding environmental conditions. Weather integration requires construction techniques that channel rainwater away from the nest interior while maintaining structural integrity during storms. The bowl shape includes subtle drainage features that prevent water accumulation. Material selection emphasizes quick-drying properties that resist prolonged moisture retention. Roof construction creates overlapping layers that shed precipitation without creating weak points where strong winds could gain leverage. The final lining represents the culmination of construction expertise, creating the soft, warm environment where eggs will develop and chicks will spend their first weeks of life. The materials chosen for direct contact with eggs must be free from parasites, chemicals, and rough textures that could damage delicate shells. The comfort level affects incubation efficiency and chick development, making this seemingly minor construction phase crucial for reproductive success. Load testing involves careful assessment of the completed nest's ability to support adult body weight during extended incubation periods and the increasing weight of growing chicks approaching fledgling size. The structure must remain stable and comfortable throughout weeks of continuous use while maintaining its protective functions against weather, predators, and environmental stresses. Aesthetic considerations influence material selection and arrangement patterns that create visually appealing results beyond pure functional requirements. The psychological benefits of beautiful surroundings might affect parental stress levels and investment in offspring care. Additionally, nest appearance could influence mate satisfaction and willingness to invest fully in reproductive cooperation throughout the demanding breeding season. Security features include design elements that provide protection against specific predator threats while maintaining the accessibility necessary for efficient parental care. Entrance positioning considers approach angles that favor adult crows while disadvantaging climbing predators. Interior layout provides escape routes for parents if the nest comes under attack. Camouflage elements help the structure blend with surrounding vegetation to avoid detection by aerial predators. Your engineering project nears completion as the final soft materials are carefully arranged to create the perfect environment for egg laying and incubation. The weeks of material gathering, careful construction, and quality control have produced a structure that represents some of nature's most sophisticated architecture, designed and built by Corvid intelligence that rivals human engineering capabilities in its attention to detail, functionality, and integration with environmental conditions. Egg vigil, hunger patience. The first egg emerges into the carefully prepared nest cup with the fragile perfection that represents months of preparation, weeks of construction, and the genetic potential for continuation of your lineage. Its pale blue-green shell, speckled with darker markings that provide camouflage protection, contains the developing embryo that will become your offspring, if successfully defended through the 21 days of incubation ahead. The weight settles into the soft lining you and your mate constructed through painstaking material selection, and your body responds with hormonal changes that trigger the behavioral transformation from active territory holder to patient guardian. Incubation requires maintaining constant temperature and humidity around the developing embryo while remaining alert to threats that could destroy weeks of investment in seconds. Your body provides a living incubator, but only through sustained contact that limits mobility, foraging opportunities, and the territorial activities that normally dominate daily life. The trade-offs begin immediately as survival priorities shift from personal maintenance to offspring protection, creating stress patterns that will persist throughout the breeding season. Internal rhythms adapt to the demands of sustained sitting, but the psychological challenges of forced inactivity test patience levels that evolved for active engagement with environmental challenges. Your mate assumes foraging responsibilities for both adults, doubling her energy expenditure while you maintain nest security and egg temperature. The partnership dynamics require trust, communication, and role flexibility that strain even well-established pair bonds under the pressure of reproductive investment. The vigilance never ends, even during the microsleep episodes that provide minimal rest without compromising nest security. One eye remains open and focused on threat approach routes, while your body maintains the precise temperature regulation that keeps embryonic development proceeding normally. The dual demands of alertness and rest create stress levels that accumulate over weeks of incubation, requiring psychological endurance that pushes corvid mental resilience to its limits. Temperature regulation becomes a precise science, as embryo development requires thermal conditions within narrow ranges that can mean the difference between successful hatching and reproductive failure. Your body provides warmth through direct contact, but environmental conditions require constant behavioral adjustments. Hot weather demands careful positioning that prevents overheating while maintaining necessary contact. Cold snaps require increased body heat production and enhanced insulation through careful feather arrangement. Memory exercises help pass the long hours of enforced inactivity while maintaining mental sharpness essential for threat detection and decision-making. Mental rehearsal of cache locations strengthens spatial memory networks that will be crucial for efficient food gathering when chick feeding begins. Review of territorial boundaries and resource maps prepares for the intensive foraging period that will follow hatching when food demands increase exponentially. Hunger management requires accepting sustained caloric deficits that test your body's energy reserves and psychological tolerance for delayed gratification. Your mate's foraging efficiency determines your nutritional status, but even optimal food delivery cannot match the caloric intake possible through personal foraging activities. Weight loss becomes inevitable, but must be controlled to maintain incubation capability while preserving enough physical condition to survive the demanding weeks ahead. Communication with your mate operates through subtle signals that coordinate nest exchange, food delivery, and threat response without alerting predators to nest location and vulnerability. Soft calls indicate readiness for brief nest departures that allow essential stretching and waste elimination. Alarm calls signal threat detection that requires immediate response and possible nest abandonment. Contact calls maintain pair bond strength during the physical separation that incubation demands. Threat assessment requires constant evaluation of environmental changes that could indicate approaching predators or human disturbance. The blue jay calls that increase in frequency might signal aerial predator presence. Unusual squirrel behavior could indicate ground-based threats approaching through tree routes. Human activity patterns that change suddenly might affect safety calculations and require immediate response protocols. The second egg arrives 48 hours after the first, requiring expanded vigilance and slightly adjusted incubation behavior to accommodate increased nest contents. Twin eggs create marginally higher stakes, double the reproductive investment requiring protection, but also backup possibilities if one egg fails to develop successfully. The clutch size matches your species' typical reproduction pattern and your territory's resource capacity for supporting multiple offspring. Weather challenges test nest construction quality and your ability to maintain optimal incubation conditions despite environmental stress. Rain requires positioning that protects eggs from moisture while maintaining thermal contact. Wind creates cooling effects that demand increased heat production and careful feather arrangement. Extended cloudy periods reduce solar warming that normally supplements your body heat, requiring higher energy expenditure to maintain proper temperatures. Predator encounters require split-second decisions about when to defend the nest versus when to abandon it to preserve your own life for future reproductive attempts. The hawk that approaches too closely triggers aggressive defensive responses, despite the risks involved in leaving eggs exposed. The snake discovery demands immediate assessment of threat level and response capability. The human presence requires evaluation of intent and danger level before choosing appropriate reaction protocols. Mate reliability becomes apparent through the consistency and quality of food deliveries that sustain you through the incubation period. Delayed returns trigger anxiety responses that affect stress hormones and potentially impact embryo development. Poor food quality creates nutritional deficits that compromise your physical condition and future reproductive capability. Excellent provision demonstrates partner, commitment, and competence that strengthens pair bonds and reproductive confidence. Night vigilance presents unique challenges as darkness reduces threat detection capability while maintaining the thermal demands that require sustained incubation. Sleep deprivation accumulates over weeks of interrupted rest, creating fatigue that affects judgment and reaction times. The balance between necessary rest and essential alertness becomes a constantly adjusted compromise that tests both physical and mental endurance limits. Embryo development proceeds invisibly within the protected shells, but your instincts monitor subtle changes in weight distribution, movement patterns, and thermal properties that indicate normal progress versus potential problems. Experience teaches recognition of development milestones that confirm successful progress toward hatching. First-time parents lack this knowledge, creating additional stress and uncertainty during the already demanding incubation period. Exercise opportunities during brief nest exchanges become essential for maintaining physical condition required for the intensive feeding period that will follow hatching. Quick flights around territorial boundaries provide muscle conditioning and stress relief while checking for changes in resource availability or threat presence. These breaks cannot exceed the time limits imposed by egg cooling rates that could affect embryo viability. Psychological preparation for hatching includes mental rehearsal of feeding strategies, predator defense protocols, and the intensive time management that will be required when helpless chicks demand constant attention. The shift from passive incubation to active chick care will require dramatic behavioral changes and energy expenditure levels that make current demands seem modest by comparison. Your vigil continues through each day and night of incubation, measuring time not in hours but in successful maintenance of conditions necessary for life development within the fragile shells that contain your genetic future. Patience, vigilance, and physical endurance combine to protect the potential that will, if all goes well, emerge as the next generation of corvid intelligence, ready to learn the complex skills necessary for survival in an ever-changing world. The countdown toward hatching proceeds invisibly but inevitably, each day bringing you closer to the moment when your sustained sacrifice will be rewarded with the emergence of new life that will transform your existence from individual survival to family responsibility that will dominate your TWAIF priorities for months to come. Hatchling chaos, feeding rotations. The first crack appears in the shell like a tiny earthquake, accompanied by barely audible sounds that signal the beginning of the most demanding period in your reproductive life. 21 days of patient incubation culminate in this moment, when internal development meets external reality, and the embryo that existed only as potential becomes a living creature, requiring immediate and constant care. The hatching process unfolds over hours, each small breakthrough in the shell revealing more of the pink, helpless form that will transform your existence from individual survival to family responsibility. The newly hatched chick emerges wet, blind, and utterly dependent on parental care for every aspect of survival. Its naked skin appears almost transparent, revealing the rapid heartbeat and breathing that indicate successful transition from egg-bound development to air-breathing life. The disproportionately large head houses the brain that will eventually develop corvid intelligence, but for now contains only the basic reflexes that trigger mouth opening and food-begging behaviors essential for immediate survival. Brooding requirements demand constant thermal regulation, as the hatchling cannot maintain body temperature independently for several weeks. Your body becomes a living incubator that must provide warmth while allowing access for feeding and waste removal. The positioning requires precise adjustment to cover the chick adequately without crushing its fragile form. One wrong movement could end the life you've spent weeks protecting and nurturing through the vulnerable development period. The second chick hatches 36 hours later, doubling the care demands and creating sibling dynamics that will affect both offspring throughout their development. Two helpless mouths require coordinated feeding that tests your partnership's efficiency and endurance. Competition between siblings begins immediately as each chick attempts to monopolize parental attention and food resources. Managing this competition while ensuring adequate nutrition for both chicks becomes a constant balancing act. Feeding schedules operate on cycles measured in minutes rather than hours, as rapidly growing chicks require almost constant nutrition to fuel their explosive development. Empty stomachs trigger vigorous begging behavior that cannot be ignored without risking chick health and survival. The energy demands of two growing chicks exceed the carrying capacity of normal foraging routines, requiring expanded territory use and increased efficiency in food location and transport. Your mate assumes primary foraging responsibility while you maintain nest security and provide thermal regulation. But the food delivery system requires precise coordination to meet nutritional demands that increase daily as chicks grow larger and more demanding. Each feeding trip must balance distance traveled against time away from vulnerable offspring. Closer food sources provide faster return times, but may not offer the protein quality necessary for optimal chick development. Prey selection shifts from adult dietary preferences toward the high protein requirements essential for rapid chick growth. Insect larvae provide concentrated nutrition in easily digestible packages, perfect for tiny beaks and developing digestive systems. Soft-bodied insects offer protein without the hard shells that could injure delicate throat tissues. Spider hunting becomes a priority as these protein sources provide excellent nutrition-to-effort ratios for efficient chick feeding. Regurgitation technique requires learned skills that transform partially digested food into portions appropriate for chick consumption. The process involves careful timing and positioning that delivers nutrition directly into gaping mouths while avoiding waste or choking hazards. Too much food overwhelms tiny digestive systems. Too little fails to meet growth requirements. The feeding technique must adjust constantly as chicks grow and their capacity increases. Waste management becomes a significant consideration as chick excrement accumulates rapidly and could attract predators or create unsanitary conditions that promote disease. Efficient removal requires timing that coordinates with feeding schedules and nest exchange periods. The waste actually provides valuable information about chick health and nutrition, with color, consistency, and frequency indicating whether feeding routines are meeting developmental needs. Sibling rivalry emerges early as chicks compete for optimal positioning within the nest bowl and priority access to incoming food deliveries. The larger chick typically dominates feeding opportunities, requiring parental intervention to ensure the smaller sibling receives adequate nutrition. Some corvid parents allow natural selection to eliminate weaker offspring, while others actively promote equality that maximizes the chances for both chicks to survive to fledging. Night feeding responsibilities continue around the clock as young chicks cannot survive extended periods without nutrition and thermal support. Sleep deprivation accumulates for both parents as normal rest patterns become impossible with helpless offspring requiring constant attention. The exhaustion affects judgment, reaction times, and foraging efficiency, creating cascading effects that stress the entire family system. Predator threats intensify as nest activity increases with constant feeding trips that advertise nest location to potential threats. The scent of chick waste and food remains creates olfactory signatures that guide predators to valuable prey resources. Defensive strategies must balance aggressive protection with the reality that extended absence from the nest during territorial conflicts could result in chick death from exposure or predation. Weather protection becomes critical. as helpless chicks cannot regulate body temperature or protect themselves from rain, wind, or temperature extremes. Storm conditions require decisions about whether to maintain nest coverage despite dangerous weather or seek shelter and risk chick mortality from exposure. Your body becomes the primary shield against environmental threats that could quickly kill unprotected offspring. Growth rates proceed at remarkable speed as proper nutrition transforms helpless hatchlings into increasingly active and demanding creatures. Eyes open after approximately a week, revealing dark orbs that begin tracking movement and responding to visual stimuli. Pin feathers emerge as quills that will eventually develop into flight plumage, but initially appear as strange protrusions that give chicks an alien appearance quite different from adult corvids. Feeding competition escalates as chicks grow larger and more aggressive in their demands for food priority. Vigorous begging behavior includes wing flapping, loud calling, and physical jostling that could displace smaller siblings from optimal feeding positions. Parental intervention becomes necessary to ensure equitable food distribution that maintains health and development for all offspring rather than allowing dominance to determine survival. Temperature tolerance gradually improves as chicks develop better thermoregulation capabilities, but they remain vulnerable to extremes that could quickly prove fatal without parental protection. Brooding requirements decrease slowly as feather development provides insulation, but sudden weather changes can still create emergency conditions, requiring immediate parental response to prevent mortality. Energy expenditure for parents reaches unsustainable levels as feeding demands peak during the period of most rapid chick growth. Weight loss becomes significant for both adults as they struggle to meet offspring needs while maintaining their own survival requirements. The physical and psychological stress affects immune system function, making parents vulnerable to diseases and parasites that could threaten the entire family. Vocal development begins as chicks experiment with sounds that will eventually become the complex communication systems that characterize adult corvids. Early calls consist mainly of begging vocalizations, but subtle variations begin emerging that indicate individual personality traits and learning capabilities. These early communication attempts provide the foundation for later language acquisition and social integration. Nest maintenance becomes increasingly challenging as growing chicks create more waste, disturb carefully arranged materials, and outgrow the original construction that seemed adequately sized for tiny hatchlings. Structural repairs and cleaning become necessary to maintain nest functionality through the remaining weeks until fledging releases the pressure on this intensively used environment. Behavioral observations of chick development provide crucial information about individual capabilities and potential that will influence parental investment decisions and sibling treatment. The chick that shows superior growth rates, intelligence indicators, or physical development might receive preferential treatment that enhances survival odds. These decisions involve complex calculations about resource allocation that balance current investment against future reproductive potential. Your role shifts from patient incubator to active provider and protector as chick needs evolve from simple thermal regulation toward the complex care requirements that will culminate in fledging preparation. The chaos of constant feeding, cleaning, protection, and monitoring represents the peak intensity of parental investment that will gradually transition toward teaching and independence training as offspring develop the capabilities necessary for survival outside the protective nest. Environment. Fledge school. First flight terror. The nest that once provided perfect security now becomes a prison as your offspring outgrow the confines that protected them through helpless infancy. 3 weeks of intensive feeding have transformed tiny, naked hatchlings into feathered creatures whose wing development suggests readiness for the terrifying transition from protected nest life to the aerial existence that defines corvid adulthood. The biological imperative for flight conflicts with reasonable fear of the catastrophic consequences that await inexperienced flyers attempting to navigate the three-dimensional challenges of urban survival. Wing strength testing begins with tentative exercises that stretch flight muscles and assess the structural integrity of newly developed plumage. Your fledglings spread their wings within the nest confines, flapping with increasing vigor as instinctual flight preparation overrides the caution that kept them safely contained. The exercises produce enough lift to raise their bodies slightly above the nest surface, providing the first taste of the aerial freedom that will soon become their dominant mode of transportation. Pre-flight instruction requires demonstrating basic flight techniques from nearby perches where young eyes can observe and process the mechanical details of successful aerial navigation. Wing positioning, takeoff procedures, landing approaches, and emergency maneuvers must be taught through visual example and gradually increasing practical experience. Your demonstrations emphasize safety margins and conservative techniques, rather than the advanced maneuvers that experienced adult crows perform routinely. The first departure from the nest occurs not through confident flight, but through an awkward combination of jumping and frantic wing flapping that barely qualifies as controlled descent. The fledgling drops from the nest edge with gravity providing most of the motive force, while desperately beating wings create just enough lift to prevent catastrophic impact with the ground. Landing consists mainly of crash landing, followed by rapid scrambling to find cover before predators notice the obvious vulnerability. Ground recovery becomes essential as most first flights end, with fledglings in exposed positions where their inability to achieve sustained flight makes them easy targets for ground predators. Your protective presence provides security, while the shaken youngster processes the traumatic first experience with gravity and attempts to understand how wing movements translate into directional control. Encouragement must balance safety consciousness with the reality that flight skills require practice despite inherent risks. Flight training progresses through graduated exercises that build confidence and competence in manageable increments. Short flights between low branches allow practice of basic techniques without exposure to the fatal consequences of high-altitude mistakes. Horizontal flight paths minimize the risks associated with altitude gain and loss, while permitting development of steering control and landing accuracy. Each successful short flight builds physical strength and psychological confidence necessary for longer, more complex aerial challenges. Crash management becomes a crucial survival skill, as inexperienced flyers inevitably encounter situations beyond their current capabilities. Teaching emergency procedures includes techniques for minimizing injury during unavoidable impacts, recovery strategies that restore flight capability after crashes, and immediate safety protocols that provide protection during the vulnerable moments following flight failures. The psychological aspects of crash recovery often prove as important as physical techniques for maintaining confidence after traumatic experiences. Obstacle navigation presents complex challenges that experienced adult crows handle automatically, but require conscious learning and practice for developing flyers. Power lines, buildings, vehicles, and other urban hazards create three-dimensional obstacle courses that demand precise flight control and spatial awareness. Training flights gradually introduce increasingly complex environments as flight skills develop sufficiently to handle additional challenges safely. Predator awareness during flight requires constant vigilance and immediate response capabilities that must become instinctual for survival in environments where hawks, owls, and other aerial predators specialize in capturing corvid prey. Teaching recognition of predator silhouettes, flight patterns, and hunting behaviors provides the knowledge necessary for threat assessment. Emergency escape maneuvers must be practiced until they become automatic responses that don't require conscious decision-making during life-threatening encounters. Wind management instruction covers the techniques necessary for maintaining flight control in variable atmospheric conditions that can transform manageable flight situations into deadly challenges. Crosswinds, updrafts, downdrafts, and turbulence each require specific response strategies that keep aircraft stable and on course. Understanding thermal patterns, building effects on wind flow, and seasonal weather variations becomes essential knowledge for safe navigation throughout changing environmental conditions. Landing technique development focuses on the precise control necessary for safe arrivals on various surface types under different approach conditions. Perch selection, approach speed control, wing positioning, and foot placement all require coordination that comes only through extensive practice. Failed landings can result in injuries that permanently impair flight capability, making landing practice one of the most critical components of flight education despite its inherent risks. Energy management becomes crucial, as inexperienced flyers lack the efficiency that allows adult crows to cover substantial distances without excessive fatigue. Teaching optimal wing beat frequencies, gliding techniques, and thermal utilization helps young crows conserve energy while building the stamina necessary for extended flights. Understanding personal energy limits and planning flight routes accordingly prevents dangerous situations where exhaustion forces emergency landings in hostile territory. Route planning instruction introduces the complex spatial awareness necessary for efficient navigation between familiar locations while avoiding hazards and conserving energy. Teaching landmark recognition, backup route planning, and emergency landing site identification provides the mental framework necessary for safe travel throughout expanding territorial ranges. The ability to plan and execute complex flight paths marks the transition from dependent fledgling to potentially independent young adult. Flock flying coordination requires understanding the social protocols that govern group flight activities while developing the individual skills necessary for safe participation in collective aerial maneuvers. Position maintenance, communication during flight, and coordination of takeoffs and landings all require practice and social awareness. Group flights provide safety advantages through shared vigilance and predator mobbing capabilities, but also create collision risks that require careful attention to spacing and coordination. Weather assessment skills become essential for flight safety, as atmospheric conditions can change rapidly and create dangerous situations for inexperienced flyers. Learning to read cloud patterns, wind indicators, and atmospheric pressure changes helps young crows avoid flying during conditions that exceed their current capabilities. Understanding when to delay flights, seek shelter, or alter routes based on weather forecasts becomes crucial for consistent flight safety. Confidence building requires balancing encouragement with realistic assessment of current capabilities and appropriate challenge levels. Excessive caution prevents skill development and independence, while overconfidence leads to dangerous situations that could result in injury or death. Each successful flight builds psychological resilience, while each failure provides learning opportunities that improve future performance. When properly processed and understood, emergency landing procedures become essential skills for situations where planned flights encounter unexpected challenges that require immediate course changes and safe arrivals in unfamiliar or suboptimal locations. Teaching rapid assessment of available landing options, approach techniques for emergency sites, and post-landing safety protocols provides crucial capabilities for handling the inevitable emergencies that occur during aerial navigation. Your pride in successful flight instruction mixes with anxiety about the increasing independence that flight capability enables as fledglings begin exploring beyond immediate parental supervision. Each successful solo flight represents progress toward the ultimate goal of complete independence, but also marks movement away from the protective relationship that defined the early weeks of their lives. The bittersweet nature of successful parenting becomes apparent, as competence development creates the capability for eventual separation that is both desired and feared. The graduation from ground-bound fledgling to competent flyer marks a major milestone in corvid development, but represents only the beginning of the complex skill acquisition that will continue throughout their lives as they master increasingly sophisticated flight techniques and develop the aerial expertise that will determine their survival and reproductive success in the competitive world of adult crow society. Teaching tricks, cultural transmission. The lessons that determine survival extend far beyond basic flight instruction into the complex cultural knowledge that transforms young crows from physically capable but naive fledglings into sophisticated members of corvid society. Your role as educator requires systematic transmission of accumulated wisdom that represents generations of corvid innovation, adaptation, and problem-solving success. The techniques you demonstrate today could determine whether your offspring survive their first winter, establish successful territories, or develop the advanced capabilities that enable reproductive success and community leadership. Tool use instruction begins with fundamental concepts that establish the mental framework necessary for understanding how inanimate objects can extend corvid capabilities beyond biological limitations. The demonstration involves selecting an appropriate twig, modifying its shape through careful bending and stripping, and using the resulting implement to extract insect larvae from crevices beyond beak reach. Your movements are deliberately slow and exaggerated to allow young minds to process each step and understand the causal relationships between tool preparation and successful resource extraction. Nut-cracking technique represents one of corvid culture's most sophisticated technological achievements, requiring understanding of physics, timing, and risk assessment that challenges even adult intelligence. Teaching begins with selection of appropriate nuts that provide optimal nutrition-to-effort ratios while offering reasonable success probabilities for beginning practitioners. The demonstration involves careful positioning in vehicle tire paths, precise timing that coordinates nut placement with traffic patterns, and immediate retrieval strategies that minimize exposure to vehicle hazards. Your fledglings watch intently as you demonstrate the critical timing that makes traffic techniques successful rather than suicidal. The approach to the roadway requires constant threat assessment and multiple escape route planning. Nut placement must account for vehicle speed, tire positioning, and road surface conditions that affect both crushing success and fragment scatter patterns. The recovery phase demands split-second timing that retrieves successfully cracked nuts before traffic conditions change or competitors arrive to steal the results. Garbage analysis instruction covers the complex skills necessary for efficient scavenging in human-modified environments, where food sources are abundant but often contaminated, dangerous, or defended by territorial humans. Teaching proper bin assessment involves evaluating container security, contents quality, and approach safety while maintaining awareness of human schedules and behavioral patterns that affect scavenging success. The lessons include techniques for recognizing spoiled food, avoiding toxic substances, and distinguishing between beneficial and harmful human food preparations. Cache management education requires transmitting the spatial memory techniques and strategic thinking that enable long-term food security through distributed storage systems. Your instruction covers site selection criteria that balance security against accessibility, environmental factors that affect food preservation, and retrieval strategies that maintain cache secrecy while ensuring resources remain available when needed. The complex mental mapping systems that support cache networks require extensive practice and guidance to develop effectively. Predator recognition training involves detailed instruction about the various threats that could kill young crows despite their developing flight capabilities and increasing size. Hawk identification covers the silhouettes, flight patterns, and hunting behaviors that distinguish different raptor species and their specific threat characteristics. Owl education emphasizes nocturnal safety protocols and the acoustic warning systems that could provide crucial seconds for escape during night encounters. Ground predator awareness includes recognition of cats, foxes, and other terrestrial threats that could ambush unwary young crows during ground foraging activities. Social hierarchy instruction introduces the complex behavioral codes that govern interactions within COVID communities and determine access to resources, breeding opportunities, and territorial rights. Teaching appropriate submission signals helps young crows avoid unnecessary conflicts with dominant adults while maintaining self-respect and social standing. Demonstration of dominance behaviors shows how to assert territorial claims and resource rights when appropriate without triggering disproportionate retaliation from more experienced competitors. Human assessment protocols require transmitting the sophisticated facial recognition and behavioral analysis skills that enable safe interaction with the dominant species in urban environments. Your instruction covers the identification of individual humans whose behavior patterns create opportunities or threats for COVID activities. Teaching includes recognition of clothing, posture, and activity cues that predict human behavior and appropriate COVID responses ranging from confident approach to immediate evacuation depending on threat assessment. Communication skills instruction involves the complex vocal repertoire that enables sophisticated information exchange within COVID communities. Teaching covers the basic alarm calls that signal different threat types and urgency levels. Social communication includes the subtle vocal variations that indicate individual identity, emotional state, and social intentions. Advanced instruction covers the regional dialect variations that identify community membership and the specialized calls used for coordinating group activities like mobbing predators or communal roosting. Food quality assessment education provides the knowledge necessary for distinguishing between beneficial and harmful food sources in environments where human contamination creates both opportunities and dangers. Your instruction covers recognition of spoiled meat that could cause illness, identification of toxic plants and berries that remain dangerous despite appealing appearance, and evaluation of human food preparations that might contain ingredients harmful to COVID digestive systems. Territorial boundary recognition requires teaching the invisible but crucial spatial concepts that determine where young crows can safely forage and where they risk violent confrontation with established territory holders. Your instruction involves guided tours of boundary areas with explanation of the scent markers, vocal warnings, and behavioral cues that indicate territorial limits. Understanding these boundaries enables efficient resource use while avoiding conflicts that could result in injury or forced displacement. Innovation encouragement involves fostering the creative problem-solving abilities that distinguish corvids from less intelligent bird species and enable adaptation to changing environmental conditions. Your teaching emphasizes experimental approaches to novel challenges while maintaining appropriate caution about potentially dangerous innovations. Encouraging curiosity and creative thinking helps young crows develop the mental flexibility necessary for success in unpredictable urban environments. Cultural variation instruction covers the local adaptations and regional differences that characterize corvid communities in different geographic areas. Teaching includes recognition of different foraging techniques, social customs, and technological innovations that might be encountered when traveling beyond familiar territory. Understanding cultural diversity helps young crows integrate successfully into new communities and adopt useful innovations discovered by other corvid populations. Seasonal adaptation education provides the knowledge necessary for adjusting behavior patterns to match changing environmental conditions throughout annual cycles. Your instruction covers winter survival strategies, spring breeding preparation, summer resource abundance management, and autumn preparation activities that enable successful navigation of predictable environmental changes. Understanding seasonal patterns helps young crows plan ahead and maintain resources throughout annual cycles that challenge survival capabilities. Risk assessment training involves teaching the decision-making frameworks that enable appropriate responses to novel situations where template behaviors might not apply. Your instruction emphasizes evaluation techniques that balance potential benefits against possible costs while maintaining safety margins that prevent fatal mistakes. Developing sound judgment requires extensive practice with gradually increasing challenge levels that build confidence while maintaining appropriate caution. Memory enhancement techniques include the mnemonic strategies and spatial organization systems that enable efficient storage and retrieval of the vast knowledge base necessary for successful COVID survival. Teaching covers landmark association, story-based memory systems, and rehearsal techniques that strengthen recall accuracy and prevent crucial information loss. Strong memory capabilities determine success in everything from cache management to social relationship maintenance. Your pride in successful knowledge transmission mingles with awareness that cultural education represents only the foundation for lifetime learning that will continue. As young crows encounter new challenges and develop their own innovations, the techniques you've demonstrated provide starting points for individual development that could lead to discoveries and adaptations that enhance COVID culture for future generations. Successful teaching creates not just competent survivors, but potential innovators who could contribute new knowledge to the collective wisdom that defines COVID intelligence and adaptability. Night roost politics in the sycamore. The ancient sycamore stands like a natural apartment building against the evening sky, its massive trunk supporting branches that have hosted thousands of crows through decades of communal roosting. The evening gathering begins as individual crows and family groups arrive from territories scattered across miles of urban landscape, each seeking the security that comes from numbers, while navigating the complex social dynamics that determine who sleeps where in the hierarchy of available perches. Your approach to the roosting tree requires diplomatic awareness of established social relationships and current power structures that could make the difference between a peaceful night's rest and hours of conflict that drain energy needed for tomorrow's survival challenges. The arrival sequence follows unspoken protocols that acknowledge existing social hierarchies while allowing newcomers to find appropriate positions within the roosting community. Early arrivals claim the most desirable perches, those offering optimal wind protection, escape routes, and social positioning that reflects individual status within the local COVID community. Late arrivals must accept peripheral positions that provide adequate safety but less comfort and social prestige than prime roosting real estate. Branch allocation operates according to complex criteria that balance individual preferences with community stability and safety requirements. The highest branches attract dominant males, whose size and territorial success earn them elevated positions with maximum visibility and escape options. Mated pairs cluster in sections that provide privacy while maintaining access to community alarm systems. Young adults occupy intermediate positions that offer learning opportunities through proximity to experienced roosters while avoiding direct competition with established dominance. Your family group approaches the roosting area with the cautious optimism of residents returning to familiar territory after successful daily survival activities. The juvenile you've been training shows appropriate deference to adult crows already positioned in the tree while maintaining enough confidence to claim reasonable roosting space rather than accepting suboptimal perches that could compromise safety or comfort. Teaching proper roosting etiquette requires balancing assertiveness with diplomatic sensitivity to community social structures. Territorial negotiations continue even during roosting preparation as crows establish personal space boundaries that must be respected throughout the night. The precise distance measurements that govern perch spacing reflect both physical requirements for comfortable sleep positioning and social protocols that prevent accidentally aggressive encounters during darkness when threat recognition becomes more difficult. Violations of spacing agreements can trigger conflicts that disrupt entire sections of the roosting community. The evening social hour provides opportunities for information exchange that serves multiple community functions beyond simple gossip. Reports about food discoveries, predator sightings, Human behavior changes and territorial boundary modifications circulate through the roosting assembly via subtle vocalizations and behavioral cues. This intelligence gathering helps optimize individual survival strategies while building community knowledge that benefits all participating members. Newcomer integration requires careful assessment of unfamiliar crows who seek acceptance into established roosting communities. The stranger evaluation process includes observation of social signals, behavioral patterns, and the territorial credentials that could indicate either valuable additions to community knowledge or potential threats to established resource access. Acceptance decisions affect both individual survival prospects and community dynamics that determine overall roosting success. Pair bond maintenance continues during roosting periods as mated couples reinforce relationships through mutual preening, synchronized positioning, and the subtle communication that maintains partnership stability under the social pressures that large gatherings can create. Roosting proximity allows intimate interaction while providing community security benefits that individual pairs cannot achieve through isolated sleeping arrangements in private territories. Juvenile education proceeds through observation of adult social interactions that demonstrate appropriate community behavior patterns. Young crows learn recognition of individual personalities, understanding of social hierarchy indicators, and the behavioral flexibility necessary for successful integration into complex social structures that will affect their future territorial and reproductive opportunities. Roosting communities serve as informal schools for social skill development. Predator defense coordination transforms individual vulnerability into collective security through shared vigilance systems that maximize threat detection while minimizing individual energy expenditure. The roosting community maintains continuous watch rotations that ensure alerts for approaching owls, climbing predators, or human disturbances that could threaten sleeping crows. Alarm call propagation systems amplify threat detection and coordinate appropriate response behaviors throughout the roosting population. Weather management becomes a community effort as environmental challenges require cooperative responses that protect all roosting participants. Wind direction shifts that affect comfort levels trigger coordinated repositioning that maintains optimal shelter for the entire group. Temperature changes prompt behavioral adjustments that conserve heat while preserving community social structures. Precipitation preparation involves positioning modifications that minimize weather exposure without disrupting established social arrangements. Dominance displays occasionally emerge during roosting periods as individuals assert or challenge existing social rankings through carefully controlled confrontations that settle status questions without endangering community. Stability. These interactions require sophisticated behavioral control that demonstrates competitive capabilities while avoiding conflicts that could fragment the roosting community or create ongoing tensions that affect group cohesion and security. Effectiveness. Sleep coordination involves gradual transition from active social interaction to the synchronized rest patterns that provide maximum security benefits while allowing essential psychological and physical restoration. The timing requires community consensus that balances individual sleep needs with collective security requirements. Premature sleep attempts leave individuals vulnerable to predation, while excessive delay depletes energy reserves needed for tomorrow's activities. Night watch duties rotate through the roosting community according to established schedules that ensure continuous vigilance while distributing the energy costs of sustained alertness across multiple individuals. Watch assignment considers individual capabilities, territorial obligations, and social standing within the community hierarchy. Effective watch rotation maintains security standards while preventing excessive burden on any individual participants. Comfort optimization requires individual adjustments that maximize rest quality within the constraints imposed by community proximity and environmental conditions. Feather arrangement, position selection, and micro-movement management all contribute to sleep effectiveness that determines recovery rates and energy restoration necessary for optimal daily performance. Individual comfort must balance personal needs with community proximity requirements that provide security benefits. Emergency protocols govern community responses to threats that require immediate coordinated action, despite the confusion and vulnerability that characterize roosting periods. Threat-specific response patterns include directed flights that disperse the community while maintaining enough coordination to regroup safely, coordinated mobbing behaviors that drive off predators through collective aggression, and controlled evacuation procedures that minimize casualties during dangerous encounters. Morning preparation involves gradual arousal of the roosting community through increasing activity levels that coordinate departure timing while maintaining security during the vulnerable period when some individuals remain sleepy while others achieve full alertness. Departure coordination prevents traffic congestion that could create collision hazards while ensuring that early departures don't compromise security for remaining roosters. Social memory maintenance occurs during roosting periods as community members reinforce recognition patterns and relationship status information through proximity and interaction patterns. These memories determine future social interactions, territorial negotiations, and cooperative opportunities that affect individual survival and reproductive success. Strong social memory networks provide crucial resources during challenging periods, when community support becomes essential for survival. Your position in tonight's roosting hierarchy reflects current social standing while providing opportunities to influence future community dynamics through behavior that demonstrates competence, reliability, and cooperation. The night's rest will restore energy, while the social interactions strengthen networks that could prove crucial during future challenges requiring community support and cooperation. Success in roosting politics provides benefits that extend far beyond comfortable sleep into the complex social resources that determine long-term survival and reproductive success in corvid society. Migration without migrating. The seasonal restlessness stirs in your bones despite having no genetic programming for long-distance migration like the warblers and waterfowl, whose departure signals autumn's advance toward winter's challenges. Corvids practice a more nuanced approach to seasonal movement that involves strategic territory shifts, resource tracking, and social network navigation, rather than the dramatic transcontinental journeys that characterize truly migratory species. Your response to seasonal change requires reading environmental cues and making calculated decisions about when to move, where to go, and whether temporary relocation offers better survival prospects than remaining in familiar territory. Partial migration patterns divide corvid populations into residents who maintain year-round territories and wanderers who follow resource opportunities across substantial distances without committing to fixed seasonal routes. The decision depends on territorial quality, food resource reliability, social circumstances, and individual tolerance for the risks associated with unfamiliar environments versus known but possibly inadequate local resources. Young crows often choose exploration over residence, while established adults typically remain committed to territories that represent years of accumulated knowledge and resource development. Resource tracking requires understanding the timing and location of seasonal food abundance that could justify temporary or permanent territory abandonment. The salmon runs that occur 300 miles north represent enormous caloric opportunities that attract corvids from vast areas, but reaching these resources requires crossing unfamiliar territories controlled by potentially hostile crows, whose tolerance for refugees depends on resource abundance and social dynamics. Information about distant opportunities travels through communication networks that span multiple corvid communities. Territory assessment becomes critical when environmental changes threaten the viability of established home ranges that previously provided adequate survival resources. Urban development can eliminate crucial foraging areas, while habitat restoration might create new opportunities that justify territorial expansion or relocation. Climate changes affect seasonal timing of natural food cycles and alter the species composition of local ecosystems in ways that require adaptive responses, ranging from behavioral modification to complete relocation. Social considerations influence movement decisions, as established relationships provide resources and security that must be weighed against opportunities available elsewhere. Leaving familiar territory means abandoning the social networks that provide information, cooperation, and emergency support during crisis situations. However, remaining in territory with declining resources or increasing competition could prove more dangerous than the uncertainties associated with establishing new social relationships in unfamiliar locations. Navigation challenges for medium-distance movements require spatial awareness capabilities that extend far beyond normal territorial boundaries into regions where landmarks become unfamiliar and local knowledge networks provide no assistance. Corvids possess remarkable navigation abilities based on magnetic sensing, star patterns, geographic features, and learned route memorization. But these capabilities require development through experience that begins with short explorations and gradually extends to longer journeys. Your decision to investigate reports of abundant waste grain in agricultural areas 40 miles east involves careful planning that accounts for energy expenditure, route safety, social protocols in unfamiliar territories, and backup plans if conditions prove worse than reported. The journey will require crossing several established crow territories whose residents might tolerate passage or might enforce boundaries that force dangerous detours through suboptimal habitat. Scouting expeditions provide intelligence about distant opportunities while maintaining connection to home territory through measured exploration that doesn't commit fully to relocation. These investigative flights allow assessment of resource quality, territorial boundaries, social dynamics, and environmental conditions that determine whether temporary or permanent moves would enhance survival prospects. Scouting also provides experience with navigation techniques necessary for successful medium-distance movements. The flight toward agricultural territory reveals landscape patterns that suggest both opportunities and challenges for corvid survival. Vast monoculture fields provide limited nesting sites and minimal natural food diversity, but mechanical harvesting leaves substantial grain quantities accessible to ground foraging species. Human tolerance for corvid presence varies dramatically in agricultural settings, with some farmers viewing crows as pest control assets, while others consider them crop-damaging vermin requiring elimination. Territory negotiations with resident crows require diplomatic skills that establish temporary access rights without triggering territorial conflicts that could result in injury or forced evacuation. The local corvid community has established protocols for managing seasonal influxes of visitors attracted by harvest abundance, but newcomers must demonstrate respect for established social hierarchies and resource allocation systems that maintain community stability during resource abundance periods. Resource exploitation in unfamiliar territory requires rapid learning about optimal foraging techniques, safety protocols, and efficiency strategies that maximize caloric gain while minimizing exposure to local threats. Agricultural environments present unique challenges, including large machinery, pesticide contamination risks, and predator patterns that differ substantially from urban or natural habitat threat profiles. Success depends on adaptability and learning speed that enables rapid integration into temporary environmental conditions. Weather monitoring becomes crucial during extended stays in unfamiliar territory where local environmental patterns might differ from home territory conditions. Storm approach directions, seasonal precipitation patterns, and temperature variation cycles could affect survival strategies and require adjustments to foraging schedules, shelter selection, and movement timing. Understanding local weather helps optimize resource exploitation while maintaining safety margins for emergency situations. Social integration involves establishing temporary relationships with local COVID communities that provide access to local knowledge networks while respecting established territorial boundaries and resource allocation systems. The depth of integration depends on planned residence duration and local community tolerance for temporary residents. Some COVID communities welcome seasonal visitors who contribute to collective defense and information sharing, while others barely tolerate temporary presence. Competition assessment requires understanding local resource abundance relative to COVID population density that determines whether additional residents strain carrying capacity or benefit from shared vigilance and information. Exchange. Overpopulation leads to resource depletion and social conflict that reduces survival prospects for all participants. Underpopulation might indicate environmental problems or predator pressures that make the area unsuitable for extended residence, despite apparent resource abundance. Communication networks in unfamiliar territory operate through different protocols and relationships than home territory information systems. Local dialect variations, individual recognition patterns, and information sharing customs might differ substantially from familiar communication systems. Learning local communication protocols enables participation in information networks that provide crucial intelligence about threats, opportunities, and environmental changes affecting survival prospects. Return timing decisions involve evaluating current local conditions against seasonal changes that might affect home territory, resource availability, and social dynamics. Extended absence from established territory risks displacement by competitors who claim abandoned resources. However, premature return might forfeit valuable resource exploitation opportunities that could improve body condition and survival prospects during challenging winter conditions. Your temporary residency in agricultural territory provides valuable experience with environmental diversity, social flexibility, and navigation techniques that enhance overall survival capabilities beyond immediate resource benefits. The knowledge gained about distant territories and their COVID communities creates options for future movements, while the navigation experience builds confidence for extended travel when circumstances require relocation for survival or reproductive opportunities. The decision to return home after 3 weeks of successful grain foraging carries accumulated knowledge about agricultural opportunity timing, social protocols for temporary residents, and navigation routes that could prove valuable during future resource crises. The experience demonstrates COVID adaptability that enables survival in changing environments through behavioral flexibility, rather than fixed migratory programming that characterizes species with less cognitive sophistication. Predator playbook: hawk, owl, cat, fox. Survival in environments shared with multiple predator species requires a comprehensive understanding of hunting behaviors, attack patterns, and defensive strategies tailored to each specific threat type. Your mental predator database contains detailed profiles of every species that poses potential danger to COVID life. From aerial hunters whose superior speed and talons create mortal combat disadvantages to ground predators whose stealth and patience can turn routine foraging into fatal encounters. Mastering these threat profiles and appropriate response protocols determines whether predator encounters result in successful escapes or contribute to the mortality statistics that claim significant percentages of COVID populations annually. Hawk identification begins with silhouette recognition that enables threat assessment from maximum distance when response time is crucial for survival. The broad wings and rounded tail of red-tailed hawks indicate powerful but relatively slow predators who rely on surprise attacks from elevated perches rather than sustained pursuit capabilities. Sharp-shinned hawks present entirely different threat profiles, with narrow wings and long tails that enable rapid acceleration and maneuverability through complex terrain that makes escape difficult once pursuit begins. Attack.